Hello everyone, my name is Taylor.
And I'm Kelly.
And we are the co-hosts of Jumping Bomb Audio, the podcast all about Joshi Pro Wrestling here on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. Every other Monday, we are with you talking about the biggest news in Joshi, along with show reviews, previews, and much, much more.
So if you're new to Joshi or you've been a longtime fan, this is the show for you. We've got something for everyone here. So check us out, Jumping Bomb Audio.
Music. It's not just part of our daily lives, it's part of our wrestling fandom as well, and it has been for decades. That's where this show comes in. Music of the Mat, the podcast devoted exclusively to the music of pro wrestling, hosted by Andrew Rich. Hey, that's me. Each episode delivers a different topic with a variety of great guests, fun conversations, musical analysis, and of course, a heartfelt pun or two. New episodes drop every other Tuesday on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice. Check out Music of the Mat only on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
What do you guys want to talk about?
You are listening to the Flagship Podcast with your hosts, Joe Lanza.
If this story was any good, maybe you people would understand it. You don't even understand the story. It goes over everybody's head. How great can it be? Maybe they need to talk more during these matches.
And Rich Crage.
This is my entire life's goal, is to be a WWE superstar, and now I am the NXT Women's Champion.
You can take that. If you want that, great. Good for you. I want MJF talking about getting roadhead. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I want out of my wrestling. Call me old-fashioned, Joe.
It is the best wrestling podcast in the world. It is the Flagship Podcast. I am Joe. Once again, Rich is still gallivanting around Scandinavia or wherever it is. He is on his latest vacation. So it'll be a Joe Lanza solo adventure, flying solo here for the second week in a row. We got a bunch of topics to get to. This should be a big show. I don't know how long I'm going to go. I don't know how long your audio file is at the end of the day for this one, but we've got to get to AEW WrestleDream and preview that big pay-per-view coming up this weekend in Seattle. Later on, we'll take a look at New Japan's Destruction Tour, including some of the matches that took place during the meat of the tour, plus obviously the review of Destruction in Kobe and a little preview of Destruction in Ryogoku is what they are calling that one. Not Destruction in Tokyo. Unfortunately, not Destruction in Beppu. But Ryogoku as they wrap up the tour in Sumo Hall, so we'll talk about that. NXT has a premium live event this weekend. No Mercy. So we'll take a look at the NXT No Mercy card coming up this weekend that Rich will be back just in time to review next week. I'm sure he's looking forward to that. We'll take a look at a couple WWE talent cuts that did not make it to the show last week because they happened after I recorded the show. So Matt Riddle talk on this week's Flagship and what I see for his future prospects. And then we will take a look at the career of Bart Sawyer, who passed away this week. Not Brett Sawyer, who we talked about last week, but this is Bart Sawyer. Two guys who, aside from having similar names, had very similar careers. And unfortunately, due to passing within 3 or 4 days of one another, because of the really scary similarities in their careers and the fact that they both used the same worked last name, they may be forever confused with one another. But we will talk about the career of Bart Sawyer, who passed away on September 12th at the age of, I want to say, 57. Yes, he was 57 years old. So we'll get to Bart Sawyer at some point in the show as well. And maybe a couple other odds and ends along the way. But of course, we have to start with WrestleDream, the big pay-per-view coming up this Sunday, October 1st in Seattle, AEW WrestleDream. There will be an instant reaction live for AEW WrestleDream, as we do for all of the AEW pay-per-views. Rich Craich will be back home in time for the show, and on Sunday night, there will be an instant reaction live. So, subscribe now. Get on that $10 tier. If you're not a subscriber, that'll be on the $10 tier. All live instant reactions are on the $10 tier. If you are on the $5 tier or the $1 tier and you want to hear the live instant reaction for WrestleDream, your only opportunity to hear Rich and I review the show. We're not going to do it on the flagship the following week. When we do the instant reaction lives, that's the one and only time that we're going to review whatever it is we happen to be reviewing. So if you want to hear us review WrestleDream, you're going to have to get on that $10 tier before Sunday. Just do it now. Don't make it an impulse buy. Don't make it hard on yourself. You're going to put it off. You're going to watch the pay-per-view. It's an AEW pay-per-view, so you know it's going to be newsworthy. You know it's probably going to be great. There's probably going to be a lot of shit happening, and you're going to want to hear a breakdown of that. And you're going to be all juiced up on Sunday night after the show and excited, and you're going to go, you know what? I want to hear the instant reaction live. And then you're going to be scrambling to your device to subscribe to the thing when you could just get it over with right now. You could just slap pause on this show that you're listening to, go handle that, go subscribe, get on that $10 tier, and that's taken care of. You don't have to worry about it. Then you just have to sit down, watch the pay-per-view on Sunday, watch Bryan Danielson and Zack Sabre Jr., watch MJF by himself start tearing through the tag team division, and then you just relax. And when the show is over, immediately following, a couple minutes after it's over, you're going to hear me screaming in your ear. You're going to hear Rich Craich screaming in your ear. We're probably going to talk about how it's one of the greatest pay-per-views we've ever seen, which is often the case with these AEW pay-per-views. Or maybe it'll fucking stink, and it'll be an interesting review from that standpoint. Either way, just take care of it now. Subscribe. $10 tier, instant reaction live, and what that $10 will give you is for the entire month of October, since the show is on the 1st, you'll have 30 days of $10 access, meaning you will have access to every single thing we do behind that paywall, both in the month of October and that we have ever done. It'll unlock everything that we've ever done or that we will ever do. Unless we add another price tier at some point. Which it might be time to try to talk Rich into that. But for the time being, it will give you access to everything we have ever done and everything we will ever do, tentatively. Anyway, that's enough of the flagship Patreon commercial. Let's get to the show. And we start with WrestleDream, and we have to start with the business of WrestleDream. Let's talk about that for a second, because, look, the ticket sales aren't great for this show. As I record this, it's Thursday afternoon. The latest update is there was 5,610 tickets out for this WrestleDream show. It is currently set up for just over 7,500 tickets, or seats, rather. The last time they were in Seattle, at the Climate Pledge Arena, that is the most Seattle-sounding name for a venue. The Climate Pledge Arena. That was for a Dynamite in January, if you recall. That was Samoa Joe versus Darby Allin. Ricky Starks versus Chris Jericho was on that show. Those were some of the bigger matches on that Dynamite in January at the Climate Pledge Arena. You know what? I may as well just give you the whole show here. Give me a second to pull that up. But the last time that AEW was in Broomfield, they did 9,120. That was the attendance of that show in Broomfield. Now, you might want to say, all right, well, that was the first time in the market. That's true. That's absolutely true. You might want to say that it was a pretty big Dynamite. And I would agree with that. It wasn't, to my recollection, a named Dynamite. No, it wasn't one of these Dynamites where it's a named Dynamite. Let me double check that. I don't want to be wrong. Actually, it was. No, it was not. New Year's Smash was actually the week before in Broomfield, where this week's Dynamite was held, and I'll get to that in a second. The Seattle Dynamite was on the same day as Wrestle Kingdom. It was January 4th in Seattle, because if you recall, that's why a lot of people felt that Bryan Danielson wasn't ultimately going to be on that year's Wrestle Kingdom card, because they had this big Dynamite in first time market in Seattle, and you're going to want Bryan Danielson on that show. And he did work a match. He beat Tony Nese in a squash. He was in the middle of that story he was doing where he was just beating the shit out of people. Ricky Starks beat Chris Jericho on that show, and Darby Allin, that's where he won the TNT title back from Samoa Joe, and what was a great match and a great feud that those two had. There was a Swerve Strickland versus AR Fox match, Jade Cargill and Red Velvet versus Kiera Hogan and Sky Blue. According to Cage Match, I know you'll be shocked to hear this, but that was the worst match on the show. And the Acclaimed defeated Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett in a tag team title match on that show as well. That show drew 9,121 fans. We're back in Seattle for a pay-per-view, which, look, I understand that was a pretty big Dynamite in the first time in the market, but you would think that for a pay-per-view, you would at least approach that number. Is that too much to ask? 5,610 tickets distributed to this point. I mean, they're not even going to sniff 9,100 fans, even if they put on an all-out media blitz, start doing BOGOs. I know there's some they've actually rolled out some discounted ticket deals already, as we're a couple days out from the show. So even if they do what they did for Arthur Ashe a couple of weeks ago, and they start giving away tickets for $5, doing BOGOs, marking down the tickets dramatically, which is this is how AEW does business these days. They have more expensive tickets than ever before, and then they mark them down dramatically before the shows, and then they scramble to get people in these buildings. For Arthur Ashe, that strategy worked to the extent that they avoided a very embarrassing situation where they had 6,500 tickets sold about a week out, and then through lots of papering, through lots of $5 tickets, which is essentially papering, through seat filler sites, through BOGOs and various ticket deals, and comps and straight up comps, they did manage to get about 11,000 human beings into the building for the show, to where they avoided embarrassment. Was Arthur Ashe a bomb? You can't call it a bomb. You have 11,000 people at a wrestling show, a lot of them paid. You can't call that a bomb. Was it a success? Is it a feather in the cap of MJF's drawing power? No, absolutely not. It was, you're down from the year before. They did 13,000 the year before on Arthur Ashe, and that was considered a little disappointing, being down from the 21,000 they did the year prior to that. So when you're almost 50% down from 2 years earlier, no, you can't call it a success. The show didn't bomb, but I can't sit here and tell you that that was a massive success either, especially when you have to scramble in the days leading up to get and do whatever it takes to get people in the building. So it's not a total embarrassment, right? They avoided showing you those upper decks where nobody was sitting, but it still looked like a healthy, vibrant building. Now, here in Seattle, we're 3 days out as I record this. Maybe they get, I would be surprised. Maybe there'll be 7,000 people, maybe in the building, maybe. If they do what they did for Arthur Ashe and paper it and give away tickets and for $5 and everything else. 9,100 the first time in the market. Look, we know they're having trouble selling tickets. Just look at Dynamite this week in Broomfield, Colorado. 2,922 was the final number of tickets distributed according to WrestleTix, which are they're pretty accurate. We all agree on that. So tickets distributed, 2,922. How many sold? Turnstile counts. We're not getting into that. 2,922 tickets distributed for last night's Dynamite. Last time in Broomfield, December. Almost exactly 9 months earlier. So this isn't returning to the market too soon or any of that nonsense that we hear about. Last December in Broomfield, the attendance for that show was 4,229. 4,229. 2,922 tickets distributed last night. And this is the same story in a lot of markets for AEW right now. They are struggling to put people in these buildings for these shows. Okay? And yeah, I think most people recognize that. I think there might be still some people with their head in the sand, or some people who, coming up with every contrived reason why that is. The high ticket prices, which is absolute nonsense. Yes, they have raised their ticket prices. You can also get into any of these shows for $20 or less. Any one of them. If there's a will, there's a way. If ticket prices cannot be your barrier when you can get into any one of these shows for $20. And that's a fact. You can look it up. Okay? And I'm not necessarily moved by the idea that AEW floor seats are $70, $80 now. When UFC goes to MSG, the cheapest ticket in the building is $900, and they're going to have a standing room only crowd. I'm not going to be moved by $70 AEW floor seats or $100 AEW floor seats, which is a reasonable price for an event ticket these days, even if it was more than they were charging before, with what Taylor Swift is charging for her shows and selling out every single. Now, is it fair to compare AEW to Taylor Swift? Is it apples to apples? It isn't. I went to a baseball game this summer with my family, and we spent for decent seats, $500, $600 to get in the door. I mean, this idea that AEW is just too expensive for people, when, quite frankly, it's one of the cheapest entertainment tickets there is for big-time events, doesn't hold up to scrutiny for me. Does it have a minor effect? Sure it does. But you could still get into these buildings for $20. BOGOs, family packs, $5 seat fillers. They slash these tickets down for nearly every show. So, I'm not particularly moved by that. This idea that AEW, they have terrible local promotion. That's why they're not selling tickets right now. It's the local promotion. Well, in 2021, when the company was hot, wasn't it the same team doing the local promotion, or did they fire an entire department from the company that I'm not aware of? If anything, the office is bigger now and more expansive than it was 2 years ago. So how was it in 2021 that they were hot and selling tickets and nobody was paying attention to the local promotion deficiencies in the company? Okay? The bottom line is this. If it's a hot product, there'd be people in the buildings. If it's a hot product, there'd be people in the buildings. Here's your get-in price for these shows. Collision this Friday, $25.50. WrestleDream, $35.50. Dynamite in the Stockton Arena on 10/4, $10. Collision in Salt Lake City on 10/7, $26. Dynamite Title Tuesday in, Independence, Missouri on the 10th, $24. Collision on the 14th in Toledo, $20. Dynamite in Rosenberg, Texas on the 18th, $20. Collision, FedEx Forum in Memphis, $34.20. Dynamite in Philadelphia on the 25th of October, $20. Dynamite in Louisville on November 1st, $20. Collision in Wichita, Kansas, November 4th, $20. I can keep going. Spare me the exorbitant cost of these tickets, please. You want to go to the show, you can get in for $20. $20. You want to go to the Stockton Arena next week, you can get in for $10. You want to go to a pay-per-view this weekend, you get a ticket for $35. That's the local pro. They have lousy local promotion. Why was no one talking about their lousy local promotion when they were hot in 2021? The bottom line is this, and I don't know why some people are so defensive about this. The company just doesn't have hot programs right now that are moving tickets. That's the bottom line. If they did, the tickets would move. They'd have more people in these buildings. That's the bottom line. That's the way it's always been in pro wrestling historically. Anything else, I'm not saying that their local promotion isn't potentially an issue. I'm not saying the raised ticket price, but these are marginal issues. These aren't the big picture reasons why AEW is having trouble selling tickets and have been trouble having selling for months and months and months now. These are ancillary, these aren't primary reasons. Now, as far as the pay-per-view buys, I think the pay-per-view is going to do well. Why? AEW pay-per-views always do well. Pay-per-view is not their issue. I think it's people know they're going to get a great show. You almost always get a great show. You're going to get one of the best shows of the year. And people know that now. And they don't want to miss out on that. And then when people don't buy it and they miss out, AEW does very strong replay numbers for their pay-per-view shows because the pay-per-views are so good. So the pay-per-view business, they're doing fine there. There's no issues with their pay-per-view business. Their television ratings are okay. They're not great. They're not blowing the doors off. Some weeks they do pretty strong numbers considering competition and those sorts of, and some weeks they do okay. I mean, I have no complaints about the ratings, but I also don't think that they're doing phenomenal television ratings either. They're doing okay. They're doing okay. Inside the buildings, people are reacting to what they're seeing. So the people who do come to the shows enjoy them. Typically, there haven't been too many dead crowds or storylines being rejected, but they simply aren't selling a lot of tickets right now. And historically in pro wrestling, that goes back to you just don't have hot enough programs to sell tickets. That's historically what it always comes down to. So, that brings us to the brochacho line. And the fact that it seems hot in the building, Tony Khan allegedly claims it sells a lot of merch. I'll take his word for it. They pop nice little quarter hours. But the bottom line is this. Last night's a great example. They had 2,922 tickets distributed. And the last time in Broomfield, December, 9 months ago, not a quick turnaround, not burning out the market. They basically go there once per year. So that's another one of these excuses that we constantly hear. Last year in Broomfield, 42.29. And that's a microcosm of what's going on in a lot of these markets. This is pretty common right now. And I just don't know why, and I just don't understand why it seems to be controversial to say, hey, look, this thing on top that gets all of the key television time, that gets the majority of the television time, that gets most of the key attention on television, is clearly the hardest pushed program on the show, and oh, by the way, features the world champion, really isn't that hot in terms of moving tickets. Why has that become a controversial thing to say? Why are some hardcore AEW defenders so defensive of the ticket sales right now in relation to the top program in the company? I don't understand it. I mean, it's just a fact. Collision right now. Mohegan Sun. Uncasville, Connecticut. This is October 7th. This is next week's Collision. 1,691 tickets out. All right, well, that's Collision, right? Dynamite, Stockton, October 4th, next week. Tickets distributed, 2,667. October 10th, Title Tuesday, Independence, Missouri. Tickets distributed, and this show is in 2 weeks, 1,627. Last time in Independence, you guys should remember that one, because I identify that as when this company's creative started to go downhill and the quality of the shows. 3,912. 3,912 people in Independence back in March. We're back here in October, some 7 months later. 1,600 tickets out. October 18th, Rosenberg, Texas. There's currently 2,000 tickets out. Broomfield, Colorado last night is not the exception. This is now the rule. WrestleDream in Seattle. Tricky market historically for Major League Wrestling to draw in the Pacific Northwest. We get that, but they did 9,000 fans last time. All right, we're comparing it the first time in the market, but once again, this is not the exception. These are becoming the rule. And I'm sorry, I don't care if you don't like hearing this. It is not unfair to point at the top program in the company, the hardest pushed angle in the company, storyline in the company, that also, by the way, features your world champion and your hardest pushed star in the company for not popping these ticket sales. It is not catching on with ticket buyers. Do I think that the Brochacho line is running people off from AEW? I don't know if I can say that. But that's a different discussion than it's not drawing money and drawing ticket buyers. That we know is an absolute fact. It's not. It's not. Because earlier this year when ticket sales were struggling, there was a point where they were still, beating year over year, and then they were flat year over year. Now they're down year over year in these markets. Now they are down year over year in these markets, the deeper we get into 2023. And this is not doom speak. I don't think anything, AEW overall is strong. They're going to get a new TV deal. I don't have any doubt of that. Their pay-per-view, as I said, does well. Their ratings are okay. They're not struggling in any other area. But this is one area of their business where they very clearly are. And I don't think it's unfair to try to examine why. And historically in pro wrestling, what do you look at? You look at the top of the card. I'm sorry, but that's just how this stuff works. You get the credit, you get the blame. It's like being a head coach. It's like being a boss. Is it always entirely fair? Maybe not. Are these other things that I'm calling excuses, like the ticket prices, the local marketing, burning out markets, whatever, all these hokey excuses, do these make marginal differences? Of course they do. But at the end of the day, if something is hot at the top of the card, it's going to draw, regardless of all of those other things. All of those other reasons, excuses, no one talks about them. If something's hot at the top of the card and we're drawing, all of a sudden all that stuff goes away. It does not matter most. What matters most is, do you have a hot star at the top? Do you have a hot program on top? Do you have things that are clicking with the ticket buying audience? And right now they do not. And it cannot be argued. It cannot be argued. In our Discord today, these are well-meaning. A lot of these people are well-meaning, but one person actually said to me, well, you can't look at Arthur Ashe 2 years ago because it was the first time they were there and they were hot in 2021. Yes, that's my point. They were hot in 2021. My point is that they are not hot now. Do we get it now? Does that kind of cut through the disconnect here? That is my point. They are not hot right now. This brochacho line thing, which people laugh when they're fishing fucking Paul White out of the sea, gets pops in the buildings, but when the rubber meets the road, we continue to sell less and less tickets. And listen, I am not advocating that they stop doing this storyline. I have never once done that. I don't like it. It doesn't suit my tastes. I don't believe it's as hot as people pretend that it is. But I don't think they should stop. Because it's very clearly the most over thing on these shows. Because nothing is hot. Right? And there's a chance it could catch fire. It took the Bloodline 2.5 years before it seriously started popping real ratings and drawing real ticket buyers. That coincided with Sami Zayn getting involved in the story and accidentally getting hot and all of those things. This is not the show to examine the reasons why the Bloodline finally caught on, but eventually it did. It was widely praised for a long time among hardcore WWE fans. It hadn't really captured the attention of anyone outside of that. Sami Zayn gets hot, the Bloodline takes off, and they have a super hot, let's call it 6-month period. From Sami Zayn through, I don't know, you want to extend it long? You want to say from when Sami Zayn got hot at the end of 2022 through, let's say, SummerSlam? So let's say it was a 9 or 10 month period where it was red hot. And now we see signs that's cooling off a little bit. Okay? That could happen with this. This could turn around. I'm not saying that's a possibility. And it's not going anywhere. And they're going to keep pushing forward with it. You know, the MJF title reign, there were starting to be whispers that this thing was a bust before the brochacho line. Lousy year-over-year ratings. You know, the Pillar feud, the Danielson feud that didn't quite do the television ratings. I don't think people think that it did. You know, it did good, but the pay-per-views always do good. The pay-per-view did good, but the pay-per-views always do good. I think that's a different thing. The Pillar story, which, you know, wasn't good at all. This brochacho thing. Now, he needs this. MJF needs this. Because it stopped his title reign from continuing to be considered kind of a bust. So they're going to see it through. And honestly, I think they should see it through. I really do believe that. Because it's their best hope for something catching on. Now, for my personal taste, I hate that. But I have to separate those conversations. If it was my personal taste, I would hope that they drop it immediately. Because I can't stand it. More embarrassing pre-tapes last night. This Roderick Strong direction is even worse than the pre-tapes. I feel like Roderick Strong's current presentation is even more embarrassing and worse than the pre-tapes. I can't stand it. But you have to compartmentalize these things if you're going to do a show like this that I do. It's selling merch. The TV ratings are okay. The reactions in the buildings are great. You got to keep doing it and see if the ticket sales follow. Anyway, let's talk about this WrestleDream show and preview some of these matches coming up on Sunday. There are 10 matches announced for the show. I don't know if they're going to do pre-show matches. Again, I'm doing this show on Thursday. I know that Renee Paquette and RJ City, AEW has announced that they're doing a pre-show deal. So I don't know if it's going to be a talking head pre-show or a wall-to-wall matches pre-show. I hope it's wall-to-wall matches. I hate when you do an hour of talking heads. It's a complete waste of time. It serves no one. I think, I don't have data to support this, and maybe they have data internally. I would think that having hot matches in front of a hot crowd would be more enticing to last-minute pay-per-view buyers than Renee Paquette and RJ City standing there giving kayfabe predictions of who's going to win matches. But, maybe I'm wrong about that. I feel like there would be more FOMO created by showing hot matches in front of a hot building and then people thinking to themselves, man, this show's going to be pretty great. Look how hot this crowd is. There's been some good matches here. You know what? Fuck it. I got nothing going on tonight. I'm going to purchase this show. One thing is it is a Sunday night show during football season, which something that Tony Khan has avoided to this point. So could that affect the pay-per-view buys to some extent? Well, we're going to learn and find out. 10 matches on the show so far. I feel like Bryan Danielson, Zack Sabre Jr. is going to go on last and is the main event. But the hardest pushed match on television is probably Hangman Page versus Swerve Strickland. What's interesting is these two matches feature guys from the area. Swerve Strickland and Bryan Danielson. Strickland works Defy shows all the time. Bryan Danielson's from the area. And the fact that it isn't drawing to this point, let's be honest, we have to call it what it is. That's not very good for either one of those guys. Now, look, Bryan Danielson, Zack Sabre Jr. is more of a boutique match. It's a vanity match for Bryan. It's a vanity match for Zack. It's a vanity match for Tony Khan. It's a match they've been trying to put together for a long time. It hasn't been pushed on TV virtually at all. It's a bone to the hardcore wrestling fan, to people like me, to people like you listening. And, so if you want to give Danielson an out, you've got Strickland near the top of the card with the Hangman. I would call those probably the top two matches on the card. Danielson's weird as a draw. He's drawn well at times throughout his career, and there's been times where he hasn't been a great draw. He has popped ratings undoubtedly for this company. The Hangman Page feud did very good television numbers. I thought Collision, the Texas Death Match of Ricky Starks this past week, held up very, very well against incredible college football competition. And that was a good number. And there have been times that, and Bryan Danielson has done good pay-per-view numbers. Obviously, he had a lot to do with the company explosion in 2021, along with Punk and Adam Cole. Punk predominantly, but Danielson and Cole absolutely had something to do with that. But then there's times where Danielson doesn't really feel like he's kind of a disappointing draw. And, being on top in this show in Seattle, and I understand it's not against an AEW opponent. There's some mitigating factors there, but this is one of those examples where Bryan Danielson lets you down a little bit as a draw sometimes, and I think that's the case here. And, Strickland too, he's a guy who, I think, it's clear the company, I think, is preparing him for a top run at some point. I think there's a decent chance that eventually happens. They hint around way too much at this, at Strickland wanting to be the first black champion. Adam Page made that point again in his promo last night. So you don't constantly bring those things up if you don't at least attempt to pay, at least attempt to pay them off. So and the way that Strickland's been pushed, he loses his feuds, but he's always in there with top guys, and there's clearly some momentum there, and there's swelling of fan support. He has a chance to be a top line player. I think there's things that he needs to clean up. I think that he comes off a little bit, he's finding himself sort of with this gimmick. He comes off a little too cartoonish for my taste sometimes. The fake laugh has got to go. It's cringy every time. Someone in our Discord kind of described what's going on with Swerve best when they said he kind of comes across like he's trying to be a comic book villain sometimes. And I think what Swerve needs to do is incorporate more of himself into his presentation and less of what he thinks this character is supposed to be in his head. And, that sometimes that takes time. There's no rush here. Okay? He could be a top guy. I think now would be too soon. There's something missing there that I can't put my finger on. And it may just be him continuing to get more comfortable and settling into this role. Remember, This was an absolute bust to start when he had the dork with the tattoos on his face and Parker Bordeaux as part of his crew. That was a total bust. I called that from the start. People said I was wrong, and who turned out right on that one? That was a complete bust. So obviously they dumped that in reverse course. They got Nana in the mix. Brian Cage is a much better fit for him. And, they're giving him a chance to cut more promos. I just think we need more of Shane Strickland to come through in the promos and the presentation, and less of sort of this forced Swerve Strickland character work that he's doing. It's subtle. I'm not saying he needs to do a complete 180, but I'd like to see more of a real guy. More authenticity is what I'm asking for in his presentation, I guess is what I'm saying. Because that comic book villain comparison was very apt, and I think that might be what that sort of intangible thing that I feel like is preventing him from feeling like a no doubt lock, top of the card guy for years that a lot of people think that he can be. I'm not quite feeling it like a lot of other people are yet with him, but I'm definitely not writing it off. I just think, it takes time sometimes to get comfortable in a role. And, we'll see what happens here. I mean, he could win the match against Hangman. There's no doubt about it. I think it's high time to get Hangman back into the main event mix, though. I thought the Black Cloud promo, he very obviously, and I'm not just saying this because I made the same metaphor or analogy. I always get metaphor and analogy mixed up when it comes to Punk, when I called him a Black Cloud. I'm not just saying, but to me, it was very obvious that Hangman Page was cutting his final promo on CM Punk on Dynamite this week when he talked about that black cloud following him around that he couldn't do anything about, he couldn't act on, he couldn't talk about, and finally the black cloud is gone, and he feels like a weight is lifted, and he can get back to being the Hangman. I mean, he was talking about CM Punk. He was talking about CM Punk. And he has enough plausible deniability with Tony Khan to where, he could say, that wasn't about Punk. But it was about Punk. Because I'm sure everyone's been instructed to not talk about Punk. But that was his way of finally getting some closure on the Punk thing and getting in his parting shot when he's been nothing but quiet all the way through since the workers' rights comment. He has laid low. He has not responded. He has been a professional. And this was his final shot at CM Punk. And now CM Punk, can't really do much about it unless he wants to go on Instagram. So, it's an interesting match. It's a huge spot for Strickland. It's the biggest match of his life, let's be honest. Danielson, Zack Sabre Jr. again. Danielson's not losing that. I'd be stunned. He's winning that match. And that's just a hardcore fan dream match scenario. Legitimate dream match people have been waiting for, including the participants, and they're throwing us a bone on that one. FTR versus Aussie Open. Look, I don't think Aussie Open ever should have been mixed up with MJF and Cole. And there was ways to avoid that even if you wanted to put the ROH titles on MJF and Cole. You didn't have to have Aussie Open win the ROH titles to begin with, if that was your plan. You could have had another team be the fall guys for MJF and Cole and win that four-way at the ROH pay-per-view. Or you could have had another team beat Aussie Open at some point. Okay, you're the booker. You control this stuff. So I don't want to hear that, well, if MJF and Cole are going to win the ROH tag team titles and that's going to be part of the most important storyline in the company, Aussie Open had to lose. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. If you knew you were going to push Aussie Open at some point, if you think that Kyle Fletcher is a future big-time player, and both of those things are true, by the way. They knew they were going to push Aussie Open at some point, and everyone in the business thinks Kyle Fletcher is a future big-time player. And he's very raw right now, and he's certainly years away from being ready for that. And people say he cuts all these terrible promos, and his promos aren't good. Do you know why Kyle Fletcher is given the mic so often in AEW? Because they know that he's a future potential top-line player, and they want to get him comfortable talking to live crowds. That's exactly what they should be doing with Kyle Fletcher. Letting him go out there and cut mediocre and bad promos in front of live crowds. while he's 24 years old and while he's in a tag team working in the mid-card. Kyle Fletcher is miles ahead of where Will Ospreay was on the microphone at the same age. Miles! Don't worry about Kyle Fletcher. He has time to come around on the mic. Maybe he never will, but he has time. And they're planting those seeds now. And it's smart. And now look at Will Ospreay. It's great promo. People who think Will Ospreay can't talk, the people who still say that, are the same people who still think Will Ospreay can't sell. They're the same people who still think Will Ospreay isn't one of the greatest wrestlers in the world. They're people to be ignored. They're people who obviously aren't paying attention, or they just hate the guy so much that their heels are dug in. And Kyle Fletcher is miles ahead of Will Ospreay was at the same age in terms of talking on the microphone. Just to give you a little point of comparison. So give it time. My greater point here is they did not need to be sacrificed to the kangaroo kicks and everything else and the goofiness. And did it bury them? Did it kill them moving forward? No. But was it necessary? No. You could have put any one of a million different tag teams in there. The Jericho-Sammy Guevara match. There was really no reason to have Aussie Open involved in that match with all of the other teams on the roster because it wasn't about them. So why have them take all of these embarrassing L's that are part of other people's storylines when you don't have to do that? Right? It doesn't mean that people aren't going to take them seriously moving forward. I think they'll be okay. But why even run the risk? It doesn't make sense. If I plan on pushing someone, call me crazy, I protect those people. And they win matches as opposed to losing them in big spots. But this is not uncommon for Tony Khan. He did the same. He often beats people like a drum before he decides to push them. Look at Takeshita. The difference there is Takeshita underwent a heel turn and a character change, so you kind of forget about all his losses as a babyface, right? This is a little bit different in that scenario. But, for whatever reason, Tony feels like it's better to at least have people on TV, even if they're losing, if you plan on pushing them later because you get them familiarized with the audience. And I get that to an extent. But now that's behind Aussie Open. The Jericho-Sammy match. The dopey shit with MJF. That's behind them. They're being presented in a serious manner again. And they're in there with FTR in a match that could steal the pay-per-view because they've had match of the year contender level matches before these two tag teams. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that Aussie Open wins these titles. I don't think they will, but they could. And it could be the best match on the show. MJF versus The Righteous for the ROH tag team titles. Now, this one concerns me. They were throwing a curveball with the Cole injury. They're not going to strip them of the titles. MJF's going to defend them by himself. Does this mean we're in for a Triple H style early aughts beating tag teams up and down the roster by himself? Cade and Murdoch winning handicap matches against the tag team champions? Is Max really going to run through a bunch of tag teams on his own and defend these titles? Doing his goofy 80s shtick? I fear that's going to be the case. And it's not what I want out of AEW. It just isn't. More WWE Raw bullshit from the mind of Maxwell Jacob Friedman. And we've been getting a lot of that lately, obviously. It connects with the people in the buildings. So I just have to take the L and fucking eat shit and live with it. And if you don't like it, you have to also. I would like AEW to be different. I would like, to not emasculate all of your heel tag teams. And for the Righteous, 2-on-1, MJF to put up a good fight, but ultimately he can't overcome two guys. That's how it should be booked. That'd be different than what the other company does. And MJF would lose no ass, and it would be a good excuse to get those titles off of them. But we'll see what happens here. Am I looking forward to a potential future where MJF, solo ROH tag team champions, runs through all of these opposing heel tag teams? I am not looking forward to that. That is going to be terrible. And that is a distinct possibility of where they could be going with all this. Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, and Kota Ibushi versus the Don Callis family. Will Ospreay, Konosuke Takeshita, and Sammy Guevara. Look, this is good for Sammy. I talked about it on the Thursday Dynamite review. You can listen to that on the $5 tier. It's the best Dynamite review in the business. Listen, I go hard. I'm going to piss you off some weeks. You're going to nod your head in agreement. You're going to nod your head in agreement and clap and cheer and pump your fist when you agree with what I'm saying. You're going to want to strangle me and bash my face into a fucking wall when you disagree with what I'm saying. Okay? And that's what compelling audio is all about. And that's what you get on the Thursday Dynamite review. But I talked about Sammy Guevara on the Thursday Dynamite review and how I think this is good for him. He's much better off as a heel. Tony Khan could try to make him a babyface top guy until, he fucking, whatever analogy you want to use, blue in the face. It's not going to happen because Sammy has a punchable face and Sammy's a much better heel. But I'm sure he'll turn him again and give it another go. It's not going to work. He's never going to be a top guy as a babyface. But I listen, this is a good example. Everything in this match has come together perfectly and it's all been well booked. You can have minor gripes here or there with minor details. But this is where I want to make the point that I feel like ever since All In and All Out, the AEW's booking has felt so much more focused and well-planned. Whereas from about the spring, Independence, Missouri, until All In and All Out, the booking felt scattershot. It felt like they were going week to week. It felt like they were going by the seat of their pants. It didn't feel like anything was leading anywhere long term. The booking, I felt, was a mess. Since those two pay-per-views, I think everything has felt focused and like there's direction. One thing leads to the other, and it feels like there's more long-term planning, step to step, and with these stories. And that, by the way, includes the brochacho line stuff, which, even though it's not for me and I hate it and I can't fucking stand it, and this Roderick Strong character is going to drive me away from AEW. I swear to fucking God, I hate it that much. Even though I hate the brochacho line stuff, I can't sit here and tell you that it doesn't feel organized, well-planned, even with the curveball they got with the Adam Cole injury. And one thing I'll never criticize MJF for is not having his ducks in a row and having his shit written down to the finest detail. That you cannot do even if you don't like what ends up on the screen. That guy gets it from that standpoint. Okay? So everything in this company has been well built and felt and feels focused. Much more so than the previous 6 months or so. And this match is a good example of that. And I'm genuinely curious where this thing goes from here. Takeshita's got the 2 wins over Kenny Omega. Does Omega get a win back here? What's next for Will Ospreay, who kind of feels like an odd fit for the Don Callis family? From a non-storyline point of view, can Kota Ibushi look like the old Kota Ibushi again? I am so intrigued by this match. Christian Cage versus Darby Allin. I feel like Darby Allin has to win. And Christian Cage, look, he's one of these guys who has a lot of his own stroke and writes a lot of his own shit. Okay? And look, he's a great mind. I know great wrestling mind is like a meme at this point that people say for a lot of people, but he really is a great wrestling mind. He really is. And I love what they've done here. Now he really is the champion, right? After the 3-way match, which I didn't see that finish coming at all, with him actually coming away with the title. And now it's just perfectly set up for Darby Allin to finish the story and not only get this title back, which has kind of become his title, right? You kind of associate the TNT title with Darby Allin. And he has a chance to get it back, but not from the dinosaur man, from the guy who is his real tormentor, and that's Christian Cage. It just all sets up perfectly. I expect Darby Allin to win, and I think he should win unless they have another big angle planned. But I'm excited about it. You can hear it in my voice. I complain a lot about the brochacho line, and make no mistake, I fucking hate it. I think it's worse than the Bloodline. I prefer the Bloodline to the brochacho line. Not even close, actually. Because of, the unfunny comedy and the fucking bullshit, the Vince McMahon style bullshit, I cannot tolerate it. Roderick Strong with his gimmick socks and his hospital gown. Oh, the wheelchair says Hot Rod. It's fucking hilarious. Adam, I need you. The fuck is that? What am I watching here? The hell was I talking about? No, but AEW, there's a lot of good things happening in this company right now outside of the fucking horse shit with MJF at the top of the card. Eddie Kingston versus Katsuyori Shibata. Was Shibata the mystery challenger from Mox with the fucked up, Phoenix match and finish, whatever happened there? I don't know. So was this an impromptu match? Shibata's on the card anyway. Can't do the Mox match, do the Eddie Kingston match. There's a lot of speculation in that direction. But this is the kind of match that might end up being fucking phenomenal or can just be a total clash of styles and fall apart. Kingston, you have to stay away from Shibata's, with strikes and you can't drop this guy in his head, It's a blessing that we have him. It's a blessing he's alive and that he's actually able to wrestle these matches. But, there's precautions that needed to be taken. So I don't know how this is going to work out. Is he going to throw a spinning back fist at Shibata and risk, hitting him with a potato in the fucking cranium? I don't know. This is for both titles, by the way. The ROH World title and the Strong title. Both of Kingston's titles, I should say. The Pure title isn't on the line here. Statlander, Julia Hart. I'll say this about Julia Hart. I think she's improving. I don't think she's that bad. And they put her on this long winning streak, right? And this is a pretty well-built match for this TBS title. Now, outside of MJF versus The Righteous, it's the match I'm looking forward to the least. I'm not going to lie to you. But I'm not dreading it like I would like some Jade Cargill pay-per-view match where you're like, oh, God, they're shoehorning this in. It's going to be terrible. Let's hope it's under 5 minutes. I'm not dreading it like having to watch Saraya or something like that. Because again, this Julia Hart push has been very well done and feels like it's been a good long-term plan. It's not time for Statlander to lose, though. I don't think it's time for Statlander to lose, but we'll see. And Julia Hart, she's spitting Sky Blue's face. Is Sky Blue gonna, join the fucking, Hot Topic crew after getting, the mist in the face like Hart did when she was a cheerleader? I don't know. The 4-way tag match for a future AEW championship match. Young Bucks, Guns, Lucha Brothers, Orange Cassidy, and Hook. That's going to be a spot fest, and it should be a lot of fun. And, now that the Young Bucks, they said they're getting refocused in the tag team division after, the trios run with Kenny Omega. But now they're ROH trios champions with the Hangman. And now Nick Jackson is in line for an international title shot. So there's a lot going on with the Bucks, right? I don't mind it. I'm not complaining about it. But there's more of a Bucks presence on the TV shows now, and that's a positive. There's a company where a lot of stars inexplicably just disappear for large periods of time. Now we have the Bucks involved in like 3 different things, which, is fine. And, we'll see who comes out of this. I don't really have a prediction. Who knows? I mean, we don't even know who the AEW tag team champs are going to be later on in the show, with Aussie Open and FTR. So are we going to set up another Bucks FTR match? Maybe. Might be a little soon for that, but I wouldn't be stunned if that's the direction they go. Phoenix has this international title now by accident. So I don't know if you want to put the Lucha Brothers in a situation where they're facing FTR. Do the Guns steal a pin? A possibility. Or do they run with this Orange Cassidy Hook team? Ricky Starks versus Wheeler Utah. This match was the classic Tony Khan, let's add a pay-per-view match at the last minute pay-per-view ad. I think at the end of the Texas Death Match, I think they might have been a little low on time and they didn't really give a chance for the Wheeler Utah, Ricky Starks angle to properly marinate at the end of Collision. if you weren't really paying close attention or you changed your channel because you knew the show was about to end and were flipping on a college football game or something, you may have missed that they started to have a little interaction there. I think maybe it was supposed to be something that was more obvious if they had more time. But at any rate, they did a second angle on Dynamite and set this up. And I think this, Ricky Starks is going to win this match. I think he's going to win the match, and I think he should win the match. And I think that's good because after taking the two losses, the singles losses to Danielson after beating him in the tag, this is a perfect opponent for Ricky Starks to get his heat back because it's the bottom guy in the Blackpool Combat Club. It's the guy who obviously they would hope that Wheeler Yuta becomes something, and they've been slowly building him, of course, but right now he's the perfect guy for Ricky Starks to beat in that group, who is still loosely, who's still not loosely, but directly connected to Bryan Danielson. And Starks, this is an obvious get your heat back win over one of Danielson's close allies. And Yuta, what I'm trying to say here, and I'm fumbling over, is he could easily eat a pin in this situation, and it does not matter. That's why it's a perfect opponent for Ricky Starks right now to get his heat back. So that's WrestleDream. It's a great lineup on paper, I think, with a lot of interesting stories coming together. This is the first pay-per-view in a while where I can look at it and say, wow, everything is so well built. Nothing feels like it's slapped together last minute or doesn't make a ton of sense, or your classic Tony Khan headcanon matches where the stories might make a lot of sense to him but haven't been told well on screen. I don't see a ton of that here. I think we have a bunch of clearly defined stories. And the good thing is, not a lot of these matches are super predictable. So that's good. And where we see where a lot of these stories go coming out of this pay-per-view. If we do get some pre-show matches, will we get some more New Japan talent? Because the reality is there's only one true New Japan talent on this Antonio Inoki tribute show, and that's Zack Sabre Jr. He's the only true New Japan regular on this show, and we were told we were going to get New Japan talent. Will Ospreay is essentially an AEW part-timer, let's be honest. He's involved heavily in the canon and the storylines of the promotion. And yes, he's a New Japan wrestler, but he's also an AEW part-timer, if we're being realistic about it. Katsuyori Shibata is a Tony Khan Universe wrestler. He's not a New Japan wrestler anymore. He is an ROH wrestler. So to me, he does not count as bringing in an outsider from New Japan, even though, there's obviously a New Japan history there. Kota Ibushi is not a New Japan wrestler, as we all know, and hasn't been for quite some time. And outside of that, there's no one else on this show where you could even make a stretch that we're bringing in New Japan talent. Now, New Japan has 2 Korakuen Hall shows on this very same weekend where most of the crew and all of the big stars are already booked, right? You're not getting Okada. You're not getting Naito. You're not getting Tanahashi. These guys are all booked for the Destruction Tour and the Korakuen Hall shows. But that doesn't mean that they can't bring in other New Japan talent. Every wrestler in the company isn't booked on these Korakuen shows. For example, Satoshi Kojima is not booked on these shows. Okay? He and I don't know if he's booked somewhere else. He's been working a lot of other promotions. He worked earlier on the Destruction Tour, but I don't see him booked. That's one name that immediately jumps out at me. Could they fly in Kojima, who has worked AEW shows before? John Moxley, CM Punk, he's done a good job in both of those spots to come work a pre-show match. There's New Japan Strong adjacent people that you can bring in. So, I don't know. I think it'll be a little disappointing if Tony Khan does this Antonio Inoki tribute show where he promised us that there'd be New Japan talent involved, and really the only true, real New Japan talent that works the show is Zack Sabre Jr. What's Yuya Uemura up to? He just lost the Feaster fired, right? In Impact. Presumably still kicking around the United States. Look, there's options here. there's some options here. If there's a will, there's a way. So, but I'm not encouraged by the fact that AEW has already told us that, the Paul Cat RJ City thing, they're pushing that pre-show, that they're going to be hosting the pre-show pretty hard. Maybe there won't be any pre-show matches. Maybe there won't be any more New Japan talent. I think that might be, at least for me, a little disappointing. It's not going to kill the show or anything. The show looks good. But, and I guess we're going to do this WrestleDream gimmick every year moving forward, right? As we crawl towards more AEW pay-per-views per year. Tony kind of shit on the idea that he's, they're going to do monthly pay-per-views, but I think inevitably, whether they do 12 a year or whether they do 9 or 10 a year, effectively they're going to expand the pay-per-view schedule. There's really no reason not to at this point, as they add pay-per-views and they continue doing well. Anyway, that's WrestleDream, and we're back after this. All right, we're back. Let's talk about this New Japan Destruction Tour. We will review the show from Kobe World Hall in a moment, but first I want to talk about the 2 Korakuen Hall shows that basically happened almost a month ago at this point, that kicked off the tour, The Road to Destruction, on the 8th and the 9th in Korakuen Hall. I caught up on everything that has made tape so far from the tour, which was really only a handful of shows. You had the 2 Korakuen shows from September 8th and 9th, and then there was the Blue Justice show. This was, I believe, Blue Justice 13 in Chiba. Looks like it drew about 1,300 fans. That's always a show that you want to check out, the Yuji Nagata Blue Justice shows. They're doing this 6-man tag best of 7 series, which I think is an interesting thing and a little bit outside the box for New Japan. And the main event of that was Yuji Nagata, Master Wato, and Shota Umino against the Strong Style threesome of Minoru Suzuki, El Desperado, and Ren Narita, the former Open Neverweight 6-man champs, the 3 guys that were kind of left unitless during the unit reshuffle when Suzuki-gun broke up. And they're doing this best of 7 series between these teams, and the first match ended in a 30-minute draw. So I think that's cool when you get outside the box stuff like that. This best of 7, which gives a bunch of wrestlers who really don't have much going on storyline wise a little bit of juice and something to sink their teeth into. And then you come out of the gate and give people a totally unexpected 30-minute draw. But that show was on the 10th. On the 8th and the 9th, we had the Korakuen Hall shows, and I really want to focus in on those. The 8th, what we had here were 2 Zack Sabre Jr. television title defenses, are really what I want to spend the most time on. On the 8th, he faced Rohei Oiwa, who, of course, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but he is taking a very unusual excursion. He's taking his excursion to Pro Wrestling Noah. He's not leaving the country. He's simply leaving the promotion. And he came back to challenge Zack Sabre Jr. for the New Japan World television title on the 8th. And he did have Keito Kiyomiya, who is now his tag team partner and mentor. If you recall, they were teaming together at the end of the G1 tour, and everybody thought that was kind of conspicuous. A little bit of a slap in the face to Kiyomiya to not only not advance to the playoffs in the G1, but then to get relegated to prelim tag team matches with a young lion. Well, it turned out there was a method to that madness and a plan, and Oiwa has returned to Noah with Kiyomiya for his excursion. A young lion no more, and my God, does this guy look like the business. He looks like an absolute stud, an absolute star on these Noah shows, and he comes back to New Japan. I believe this was for the first time as a full-fledged, well, he's not really a full-fledged member of the roster yet because he's not back full-time, but as not a young lion. And he took on Zack Sabre Jr., and I got to tell you, this went in my notebook. This was, low-level notebook, 4 stars, somewhere in that range. But Zack Sabre Jr., is on absolute fire right now. Every time I see this guy work, whether he's popping up on Noah shows, whether it's defending this New Japan World TV title, which, when he won that title, we were all kind of surprised because all the talk out of the company, and this was something that I reported, but then they ended up just going public with it anyway and saying that this was a title that was going to be built around young talent, right? They publicly said that at one point. And then they go and put it on Zack Sabre Jr., who, is pushing 40. Guy's 36 years old. All right, maybe pushing 40 is a little rough. 36. Okay, here's how it works. 30 to 33 is early 30s. 34 to 36 is mid 30s. And I would say 37 to 39, you're pushing 40. So let's give Zach a few more months before we say he's pushing 40. And it works that way for every 10 years of the age bracket, by the way. Okay? If you're 28, you're pushing 30. If you're 62, you're in your early 60s. Okay? If you're 91, you should just be surprised when you wake up in the morning. Like, that's how it works for every 10 years of these, So, anyway, Zack Sabre Jr., we all thought Ren Narita was going to win that thing, remember? Zack wins it, and we're like, what the fuck is this thing? It's turned out to be a super fun title. And this match rocked. And Oiwa looks like a star. And, like a lot of these young lions, he's 24 years old. He's about, 2.5 years in, not quite 3 years in. And his work is already just, I'm going to talk about NXT later, and I know that we kick WWE a lot and pick on the PC a lot, but the difference in quality of the work between what the New Japan Dojo churns out and what the multi-million-dollar Performance Center churns out in terms of, you look at some of the 24-year-olds who are 2.5 years in to the PC. A lot of them aren't even on TV yet. A lot of them are getting cut before they end up on TV. And a lot of the ones on TV are just dire. Fundamentals bad. Trying things above their heads and not being able to execute them properly. Which, by the way, that doesn't happen in New Japan. Okay? It's crab holds and forearm strikes, baby, until you're ready. Then maybe we'll let you throw a suplex, So they're on to something. But here's the thing. In the dojos in Japan, particularly the New Japan Dojo, and really all of them, for the most part, they're teaching you how to work. In the Performance Center, they're teaching you how to work. A very specific WWE style, but they're teaching you how to work. But they're more so teaching you how to be a television star. And that's the difference. They have all these resources, they spend all this money, and they teach they make these people go out and get their teeth fixed, and they make the women go out and get tit jobs, and they put the guys in the gym for 4 hours a day, so they're all fucking ripped, and they make these people, all these conventionally attractive people, look great on television. And then maybe if you're lucky, they're competent in the ring. It's just a different mindset because it doesn't matter there. You don't need to be, have a finely honed work in that company to make it to the main roster. You just need to be able to work their way. Feed and bump if you're a heel and have some signature moves if you're a babyface and make sure you sell your ass off because everybody sells their ass off in WWE. That's an obvious thing. Work there. That's all they're concerned with. And then you see a guy like Oiwa who's 2.5 years in, and if you stuck him in NXT right this second, he'd be the best worker in on the show. Who isn't someone who's, I'm probably forgetting someone who's currently in NXT who's like a 13-year pro or something, that's 38 years old and really should be on the main roster. But you get the idea. I'm talking about he'd be the best worker out of someone who's considered a rookie or a trainee or someone, of that ilk, without question. And it's just stunning particularly when they shed the Young Lion deal and they're allowed to really spread their wings. Now, we know these guys are good workers when they're Lions, but they have to keep it basic. But, this was an excellent, excellent match. And Zack Sabre Jr. has just been on fire. And he followed it up the very next night because on the 9th, he wrestled Satoshi Kojima for what was supposed to be the young guy title. A 36-year-old defending it against a 53-year-old. And Satoshi Kojima is now 53 years old. 53. And I don't think his work has declined at all from when he was 43 years old. When we started this show, he was like 41 or 42 years old, and we used to marvel at how good he was then. He's now 53, and he's still tearing it up, whether it's in Noah, whether it's in All Japan, whether it's in New Japan, whether it's in AEW. This guy hasn't shown the decline yet. It's coming. It has to come at some point. And I didn't think this match was as good as the Oiwa match, but I'd go about 4 stars on Sabre Oiwa. I'd go about 3.5 or so on Sabre Kojima, thinking about it. But, man, Cozy is just, most of you know he's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. Love the guy. Everything I want in a pro wrestler. Great heel. He hasn't worked heel in a long time, so a lot of people don't know. But a great heel. Go find his heel stuff. It'd be interesting to watch if you're a newer fan. Like if you're someone who came in and discovered New Japan during their last boom, right? You've never seen Kojima work as a heel. And I think you should go find that stuff. In fact, maybe for match of the week, I'll find some Kojima match where he works heel. But, and then as a babyface, I mean, just heart and guts and desire that comes through in his work. That always comes through in his work. He shows fight. And he hits you with that Western Lariat, and it is over, baby. That's it. He has protected that shit. A disciple looked up to Hansen, has protected that shit. The strongest arm. So Sabre back-to-back nights, and then the back end of that show on the 9th saw a trios title defense. Okada, Tanahashi, and Ishii defeated. I love this team. Hiroyoshi Tenzan, Togi Makabe, and Tiger Mask. Dusting those guys off for a title match. Again, I love shit like this. Came out of nowhere. Why would they book this? These guys have barely wrestled this year. Tenzan and Makabe as they slow it down. Tiger Mask is often CMLL wrestling El Satanico in lightning matches. This is what these titles should be used for. Random ass 3-man teams going after the champs. I love that shit. And let me tell you something, it over-delivered. This match was way better than it had any right to be. You got Hiroyoshi Tenzan, Togi Makabe, and Tiger Mask. 3 guys who 15 years ago were working the top of the card. And you put them in a semi-main event in Korakuen when they know they don't have many of those left. The working shoes were on, baby. The working shoes were on. This wasn't Tiger Mask in an opening match watching his young lion partner take a pin and mailing it in, throwing a stamp on it. No. They worked. Even Makabe, my favorite slacker. I've been doing the Makabe bump counter for years. No, they put in effort here. This match is way better than it looks like on paper. And this is a cool little deal to keep Okada busy while he's not in the title mix for this Wrestle Kingdom cycle. And let me tell you something about Okada as I watch him. he is starting to come across, and he's starting to convey the aura of a legitimate Japanese legend. He comes down in that robe. He takes that robe off and he stands there, and you're like, holy shit. I'm looking at a fucking legend. Kazuchika Okada is a fucking legend. You know, even when he was winning all those titles and he was, the ace of the company, we still kind of looked at him as like this 27-year-old kid. And he came across as, even though he was the top star in the company and the ace, as kind of humble, right? Like that. Still he came across like unassuming. Like he had fire when he needed it, don't get me wrong. But there was always that hint of awkwardness and that uncomfortableness that you sensed that he had in his own skin to some degree. And that made him charming. That made him even more likable. Because he has never come across like this cocky, entitled. You know what? He's never come across like his gimmick. He's never come across like the Rainmaker. And the whole idea behind the Rainmaker was a rich, entitled, cocky, everything handed to him. That's the whole point, the dichotomy between Okada, the office boy, everything handed to him, money falling from the sky, every opportunity, and Naito, the hero of the underserved, the forgotten, the ignored, the working man. And that was the whole essence of the rivalry. But yet, Okada, despite having that gimmick, has always come across a little awkward, a little uncomfortable in his own skin, but not enough to where it, destroyed the aura. Yeah, like a charming goofball. That'll fuck you up. But now, he disrobes, and you're like, this guy's a fucking legend. I'm watching a fucking legend. He's 35 years old. I've talked about this many times. This podcast, we grew up with Okada. This podcast debuted the same month Okada's push began. And as he grew, we grew. And here we are. Big, fancy, niche podcasting legends. You should see the shit-eating grin on my face when I say that. That's right. I'm a niche podcasting legend. And here's Okada, 35 years old. Guy's a fucking legend. And it just emanates from him when you see him in the ring. Like, that guy's a fucking legend. That's Kazuchika Okada. That is that motherfucker. I'm all fired up. I want to see him hit a fucking Rainmaker and win that title again. That's what I want. Strap him up. Do you know how lucky we are? Do you know how lucky we are to have lived when this guy was on top? And he's entering the legend phase. He is. He's a legend now. He don't come across awkward anymore. He doesn't come across uncomfortable in his own skin. Yeah, I remember when he had already won the IWGP title once or twice by this point. And I had a wrestler from New Japan tell me, I'm not going to totally open up our locker room and reveal what goes on back there, but you'll never believe how humble this guy is. And I'm not going to say the specific things that he does, but you'll never believe how humble this guy is when he's the top guy. And we're all making money because of him. Someone told me that from the company. And this was into one of Okada's championship runs. This wasn't young boy Okada. This was Okada who was being pushed as along with Tanahashi at that time, the top star in the company. You know, right in the midst of when Tanahashi was, that rivalry which was designed for Tanahashi to get Okada over at his level. And with no disrespect to the ace of the universe, Okada surpassed him. He did. Maybe some people don't want to hear that. But all credit to Tanahashi. And Tanahashi elevated himself in the process as well. What a great era of pro wrestling that was. And here's Okada, a fucking legend. So you know what? When he's in there defending the never openweight 6-man titles against 3 guys from, a couple generations prior, I'm locked in. Yeah, I'm locked in. Why would I skip that? Shame on you if you skipped it. You missed a good match too. You know what? Don't go back and watch. You don't deserve it. Skipping Okada. What do you think you are? You don't skip the Rainmaker? I'm sure when I'm on my deathbed, if I'm lucky enough to be on one, I really don't want to die suddenly. At some point, I'll think about pro wrestling. Might not be my top priority in that moment. But at some point, I'll probably think about my life and my connection to pro wrestling and how grateful I am and everything that pro wrestling has done for me. And all of the great things that I experienced in pro wrestling, and seeing Kazuchika Okada wrestle live is going to be near the top of the list. You know how amazing that is? I saw that man win an IWGP title match in Madison Square Garden. Madison Square Garden. The house that Bruno built. People shit on that show. They're out of their fucking minds. Especially if you were at that show and you don't appreciate everything you witnessed at that show. Shame on you. Shame on you. You saw one of the all-time greats, in the pantheon of all-time greats, a fucking legend, Kazuchika Okada, win an IWGP title match in Madison Square Garden. You were one of, whatever it was, 20,000 people, give or take, who can say that they saw that with their eyes. You saw the Great Muta. You saw Jushin Thunder Liger. Madison Square Garden. I'll never forget that show. I'll never shit on that show. I am grateful. I saw Enzo and Cass do a worked shoot angle with the Briscoes. I was 2 rows away. Another great moment in wrestling history. I saw Kazuchika Okada wrestle a fucking G1 match against Hiroshi Tanahashi. And I didn't have to fly 19 hours to see it. I had to drive 90 minutes. Okada versus Tanahashi. I will remember that as long as I live. And how special that was. And that may have been the worst, quote-unquote, match that those two guys ever had. I don't give a shit. I love wrestling. I love it. When it's great, I love it. They did an elimination match in the main event. It was United Empire versus LIJ, and Jeff Cobb eliminates Tetsuya Naito to win the match, and then he cuts a great promo to set up the, because he was challenging Naito in Kobe for the rights to the Wrestle Kingdom main event against Sanada. And I thought Cobb's promo was phenomenal. Now, we all knew he had no chance against Naito. They're not main eventing Wrestle Kingdom with Jeff Cobb versus Sanada, let's be honest. That's not even a G1 main event. Jeff Cobb versus Sanada is like the third match to come out the curtain, in Sendai on night 11 of the G1. It's not a Wrestle Kingdom main event, let's be honest. But Cobb, let me tell you, he cut the promo of his life, which again, we're not clearing the highest bars here, but not trying to bash Jeff Cobb. He's not known as a stick man. But he cut a really good promo. And for a moment had people convinced that he's taking Naito out in Kobe. But he was the sole survivor. These elimination matches, I enjoy these New Japan elimination matches because you never know what they're going to do. A lot of times the big stars go out very early. It's over the top. It's also pinfall submission. Survivor Series rules otherwise. And the other notable thing here, Callum Newman started with New Japan on this tour. He's, brought in by Ospreay. He is an Ospreay protege, and he reminds you of a very underdeveloped Ospreay from like 2013 or 2014. Probably a little ahead of him at the same stage. Although Ospreay got real good real fast, so Newman has to really ramp it up if he wants to keep up with the Ospreay curve. But he was the first guy eliminated. Shingo took him out. He's Newman is the bottom guy for United Empire, and they've got 9,000 members. They got the 5 guys that were in this match: Newman, Okan, Hanare, Jeff Cobb, Ospreay. Then they got TJP and Akira and Aussie Open. Jeff Cobb shouting them out, so they're still in the mix. So it's fucking United Empire's like fucking Wu-Tang Clan out here with 5,000 members. Leonard Skinnerd. If you prefer. But Newman is the new guy, and he was the first man eliminated. But, I took a look at what I could from him from this tour, and, he's getting his feet wet. He looked okay. Give him some time, though. It's remember Dan Maloney and how totally nondescript and nervous and just not great he looked at the beginning of the Super Junior Tour, unsure of himself, walking on eggshells. It's a little tricky. Remember Chase Owens, his first couple matches in New Japan, the NWA Junior title match on one of those shows, Destruction and Bipu or something, where he kept doing arm ringers on his opponent over and over because he was so nervous. He didn't know what moves to do. It's tricky. And Newman has looked better than those two guys did at the start of their New Japan runs. But, by the end of the Super Junior Tour, Dan Maloney looked like the guy that all of us Rev Pro watchers and have been accustomed to for years. This super confident fucking killer. And it just, the switch flipped at some point once he got familiar with his surroundings and built a little confidence, and now he's drilling Maloney, and he's just, dropping F-bombs and kicking people's asses and is totally comfortable in his own skin at this point. Callum Newman is, I am fully confident that he is going to be perfectly fine in New Japan. And it's just another example of Will Ospreay working hard to get somebody in and hopefully put them on the path to making serious money in the pro wrestling business. And we see what happens with Callum Newman. I am buying the stock. I've been a fan of his potential for a long time. He's 23 years old? You get the idea. He's 21. This motherfucker's 21. He is light years ahead of where I thought he was like 24. He is 21. And he is way ahead of where Will Ospreay was at 21 years old. I mean, it is not. I mean, he's got the same body. He kind of looks the same. But he's way ahead of where he's ahead of I apologize what I said earlier. I thought he was like 24. That's when Ospreay really started to take off. He's 21. My God. New Japan got their claws in this guy. I mean, he's going to be a player. Save this. Slap favorite on this one. He's going to, and they got oodles of time to make it happen. Did I just say oodles? Disgusting. So anyway, that was the Cork and Hall show on the 9th. And then, there really wasn't much else that hit tape. And then we flash forward a couple weeks to the 24th and Destruction in Kobe, which I thought was a pretty good show, top to bottom. Wasn't a great show, but there was a lot of solid wrestling on the show. And we will start at the top of the card. The main event was Will Ospreay defending the United States title, which he is now deeming the UK title against Yota Tsuji. Now, Yota Tsuji, they bring him back. He immediately is being put in these massive title matches. He's immediately a featured player in the A block of the G1. He's having matches against the top guys in the company, Sonata, Will Ospreay. And he's losing all of these matches. But here's the thing. It's so obvious that this guy's going to be a main event player and probably a gigantic star much sooner than later. I haven't seen one detractor of this guy. And also, by the way, he's already 30. He is the same age as Will Ospreay. In fact, he might be older. I'd have to check the birth dates. But just for a little perspective, this is not a guy he's not Callum Newman. He's not 21 years old. Okay? He's 30. So they are shitting and not getting off the pot here, or however that would go. Shit or get off the pot. So I guess that would mean if they're shitting, right? I don't know. But yeah, he's been in the system since 2018. So this is his 6th year. He's going into his 7th year in the system. He had an extremely long excursion. He left in 2021 and spent all of 2022 abroad, Rev Pro. And the thing about him is he did a lot of bouncing back and forth to CMLL. In fact, I think, and you can fact check me on this, I think he even went back to CMLL didn't he go back to CMLL after he came back to New Japan? He came back to New Japan and did that angle to set up the match with Sonata. Then I think he went back and finished up with CMLL and then came back and wrestled Sonata. Either way, he did a bunch of CMLL tours after he finished up with Rev Pro. After bouncing back and forth from Rev Pro to CMLL over the course of a couple years. And in this match with Ospreay, he used some lucha. This isn't a dude who was sent to Mexico because the company asked him to go and he went through the motions and now he'll never incorporate lucha into his work again. This guy was doing lucha-style arm drags in the opening minutes of this match with Will Ospreay and then was doing lucha shit during the closing moments of this match. Closing stretch. In addition to that spear that he's now gotten over, despite the fact he never wins, he's gotten that spear over. He has unique offense. I don't know why I said it like Jim Ross. He has unique offense that you don't see other people do. And he's got charisma for days. He's got those big fake white teeth that everybody in NXT has. And he's got that great smile. And he's charismatic. And the guy is destined for superstardom in New Japan. I firmly believe that. He's going to be a top guy. And Will Ospreay had a tremendous match with him. I'd probably go about 4.5. Not quite match of the year levels, but close. And Tsuji, now look, clearly Ospreay was driving the match. There's no doubt about that. You know, if you're watching closely, if you know what you're watching, he was driving that match. But, you know, a lot of cool shit. Like, you know, they're up on the top turnbuckle and then, you know, Tsuji's going to give him a Spanish fly and then they reverse it while they're up there, and then Ospreay gives him the Spanish fly. Then there was that double stomp off the top from an angle that I've never seen before that Tsuji gave Ospreay. And you know, I'm not going to break down every spot in the match, but it was, you know, just a more than worthy main event. I mean, Tsuji has already challenged Sonata for the IWGP title and wrestled the champion in a G1, and now he's headlined in Kobe. He's headlined in Kobe. And the show drew 4,200 fans. You know, nice crowd in Kobe by the standards of this year for New Japan. And, you know, absolutely a match that you should go out of your way to see if you want to, you know. And they're not waiting around. You know, Tsuji's 30. So they're establishing him with the top players right now because that push is coming. You could argue it's happening already. Naito beat Cobb as we knew that he would. Good match, not a great match. I'd go about 3.5. Good match, though. Good match. And Naito at this stage with the knees and everything else, you know, look, I wrote about it in my August notebook roundup where Naito was my wrestler of the month because nobody has been better in the big tour closing G1 matches historically than Tetsuya Naito. He's number one. He might not be the guy who, you know, when you're in Sendai or you're on some random tour stop on the G1 and he's wrestling a semi-main event against some guy who's going to finish with 4 points. He's not the guy who's going to go out there and have banger after banger like Ishii or Ospreay or, you know, Shingo Takagi or you know, from another era, someone like, you know, the way Hiroki Goto or, you know, from 10 years, you know, he's not, or Tanahashi before, he's not that kind of guy and never has been in the G1. You know, you look at your G1 notes at the end of a typical G1 and he'd be like your 7th or 8th best wrestler in terms of great matches. And then he'd have a block deciding match and a final, and they'd be the 2 best matches of the entire tournament. And, you know, that was the case again this past G1 where he was phenomenal in the mat in, you know, the playoffs. But a match like this at this stage of his career, cartilage on cartilage with those knees, 41 years old, this is what you're going to get. A nice little 3.5-star match. But he's going to go out there at the Tokyo Dome and try to have a match of the year contender. I mean, that's Naito now. And that's fine. I don't have any problem with that. Shingo and the Great Okan. Shingo wins the match, and I thought this was notebook material. Probably 4.25, somewhere in that range. Maybe the best Great Okan match. Now look, I'm thinking about this, and I probably enjoy the Great Okan more than most people. And I'm trying to think, I don't usually have great recollection for stuff like this. Was this the best Great Okan match I've ever seen? I know he's had just singles matches. You know, didn't he have a really great G1 match with Will Ospreay? This might be the best Great Okan match I've ever seen. And I enjoy his work more than most. I'd have to look back in my notes. I'm probably forgetting stuff. But yeah, you know, and Shingo's a guy who, when he's given an opportunity to be in a big singles match in New Japan, he always delivers. So, Shingo wins that one. Tag title match, Bishiman defeats TMDK. Hiroki Goto, I think, got injured at some point on the tour. Or maybe in this match. Is he still injured? Let me double check that. What am I looking at here? Goto. Oh, okay, here we go. So let's see if Goto is working these Cork and Hall shows coming up the same day as the WrestleDream. Those would be on the 30th and the 1st. Do we have Goto on these shows? No, we do not. So, yeah, at some point, I knew he got hurt on this tour, and he's out now, currently. So, look, this match was okay. Again, I'd go somewhere 3.5 range. as they defeat TMDK and retain the tag team titles. So good stuff out of Bishamon as usual. Sho defeats Taichi, King of Pro Wrestling. So Sho is the new King of Pro Wrestling. The stipulations were no time limit, and all of the stablemates were handcuffed at ringside. Now, this wasn't much of a match. It was more a backdrop for Yoshinobu Kanemaru turning on just 5 guys and joining the House of Torture. So this was an angle disguised as a match. That's what this was. As just a match, it was horrid. It was awful. It was, modern show with the wrench and everything else. But Kanemaru, bouncing around every unit in New Japan. He's now part of House of Torture, where I think he's actually probably a better fit, right? Than with just 5 guys, which is now just 4 guys again. The original 4 guys, remember, it was Taka, Kanemaru, Taichi, and who was and Dookie. Then Sonata joined. It became just 5 guys. Now Kanemaru's out, and they're just 4 guys again, but not the original 4 guys, because it's Sonata instead of Kanemaru. So they had the just 4 guys t-shirts. Then they became just 5 guys and made the just 4 guys t-shirts obsolete. Now the just 5 guys t-shirts are obsolete. And now they have to print up more just 4 guys t-shirts. Unless they add another 5th guy. Yuya Uemura's coming back soon. Could he be the new member of just 4 guys, making it just 5 guys again? There's been some speculation there. We'll see. And then the rest of the show was the undercard stuff. Bad dude Tito, who is in tremendous shape. Oh my God. This guy's fucking... He's been taking his Nugenics. And Zack Sabre Jr. Took on Okada and Big Tom Ish. And you might be surprised to know that Zack Sabre Jr. and Bad Dude Tito won that match. You would think that Bad Dude Tito was there to take a fall. No, sir. Yo and Leo Rush. They're keeping Zach strong is what it is. Because, they made it official. I kind of blew that off, but he came out and challenged Ospreay for the U.S. title at the Copper Box. Royal Quest 3, or whatever number that's on. I think it's 3. And Ospreay accepted. So Sabre's been, racking up wins left and right as they build him up. And he's probably losing to Bryan Danielson on Sunday. But anyway, Leo Rush and Yo defeat Hiromu and Bushi. Leo Rush wins that with the final hour. He's working these tours and he's looking good and they keep pushing him. So good for Leo Rush. We had... bunch of Bullet Club dudes, Gato, Coughlin, Kid, Chase Owens, and David Finlay against Jado, Phantasmo, Hikuleo, Tamatanga Tangaloa. I gotta be honest with you, I have no interest in that match, and I didn't pay much attention. I don't remember a thing. I may have paid attention, my eyes may have been glazed over, and I don't remember, because I don't remember anything about that match. That absolutely is a match where if it was happening in my backyard, I'd shut the blinds. Dookie, Sonata, and Taka defeat Dick Togo, Yujiro, and Evil. Okay? Taka scores the pin. He pins Dick Togo. Taka. What a curveball that was. When's the last time Taka won a fall? Paging Chris Samsa. SportofProWrestling.com. Fucking A, man. Guy gets more plugs from Kevin Kelly. Kevin, throw us a bone, my man. I know I'm not the one sending you the notes. When's the last time Taka won a fall? He always loses. So again, I like that they did this. It felt different. And we talked about him earlier. Drilla Maloney and Clark Connors. They pick up a neat and tidy win over Tiger Mask and Kevin Knight. And it was Drilla Maloney with the full clip. He beat Tiger Mask, not Kevin Knight. Which, honestly makes sense. Because Kevin Knight's a guy who they are pushing to some degree, and he's getting a title shot on the Destruction in Ryogoku with Kushida against the aforementioned Drilla Maloney and Clark Connors. So Tiger Mask ate the fall there. So as we look at the show in Ryogoku, Kukugan, or Kugakan, or however you pronounce that, here's how I pronounce it: Sumo Hall. Can't mess that up. That'll be on the 9th. So, a little early to preview that. Guess we could have did it next week, but I was talking about this tour today, so I'm doing it now. What are you going to do about it? What you got to say about that, Craich? Okada, Tanahashi, and Ishii defend against the Motor City Machine Guns and Josh Alexander. This is exactly what I'm talking about earlier. This is the kind of cool, off-the-wall shit that I want to see with these titles. Singles match. If this were a Gabe Sapolsky show, this would be grudge match or special challenge match. Let's go with that. Special challenge match. Tanga Loa takes on Chase Owens. And I know you're all super excited about that one. Cannot wait. Champing at the bit for Tanga Loa versus Chase Owens. We already mentioned the War Dogs, Clark Connors and Drilla Maloney against Kevin Knight and Kushida for the junior tag titles. Kushida's never even in Japan. I don't know what the deal is with him. He's almost back because they feel bad for him or something. So I don't feel like this will be a title change, but who the fuck knows? Who knows with those titles? But I feel like Connors and Maloney should win the match. LIJ, United Empire, 8-man, typical. None of these dudes have a big match for this show, so they're all going up against each other. Naito, Yota Tsuji, Shingo, and Bushi against Callum Newman, the Great Okan, Hanare, and Jeff Cobb. Interested. I assume there's a chance that Callum Newman eats another pin here, like he was the first guy out of the elimination match, but I'm going to keep an eye on him. I want to see how he does at the end of this long tour. The 6-man tag team best of 7 series. We're on match 7, as they've been doing these things all tour long. We talked about it earlier. So Wato, Aminu, and Nagata against Despi, Minoru Suzuki, and Ren Narita. Now, if you want to know what's going on in terms of this is the final match of the series. So let me get you caught up on how that has been going. So we've got, let me pull this up. What would be the best way to do this? Or is this match number, is this match number 7? Let me check the New Japan site. The on-air lack of preparation that you are accustomed to with this fine program that you're listening to. It is the best of 7 series final, according to the New Japan website. But is there something I'm not understanding about this? Because I'm only seeing results for like 3 matches. I don't know. I don't care. They're having another match at in their best of 7 series that is finishing, even though this is only match number 4 for some reason. So I'm sure the Swink is going to correct me and explain to me what the hell is going on here, because I don't know what's going on. I'm perplexed and confused. What else is on this fucking show? Oh, the other War Dogs, Coughlin and Kidd, defend the other set of tag team titles, New Japan Strong Openweight Tag Team title defense against El Phantasmo and Hikuleo. Then we have a 3-way for the junior title. Hiromu defends against Speedball Mike Bailey and Leo Rush. And look, that has a chance to be pretty great, right? And then a never openweight title match. David Finlay, yes, he's still that title holder. He defends against Tama Tonga. Will that feud ever fucking end? Does the world really need these 2 guys to continue having matches? And forgot, I am begging David Finlay to just win that, because if Tama Tonga wins, then David Finlay's going to get another. Enough. And and then Sonata defends against Evil, lumberjack match. There is growing, not speculation, but there's a growing movement of people who think Evil is winning this and going to the Dome against Naito. I gotta tell you, I can't completely discount that possibility. Be funny. It's a funny outcome. Could happen. And I gotta be honest. I have to tell you, I don't know if I have a preference between Sonata or Evil in that match. To me, it's like, obviously Naito and Sonata have a chance of having a better match because Evil's it's gonna be House of Torture shit. But I'm not excited about Sonata in the main event of that show. How could you be? So fuck it. Put Evil in there for the meme. You know what? I'm rooting for Evil. Executive decision. We're back after this. All right, we got a few more topics to get to before we wrap up the show. We're going to preview the NXT No Mercy show on Saturday. And then we're going to talk about a couple of the WWE releases that were made after we published the podcast last week. That would be Ike Manjiro and Matt Riddle. And then we also have to talk about the career of Bart Sawyer, who passed away. He didn't pass away last week, like I said earlier. He died on... When did Bart Sawyer pass away? He passed away on September 12th. So a couple of weeks ago, Bart Sawyer passed away at the age of 57, and we will talk about his career first. As far as that best of 7 series in New Japan, I took a closer look at that. As of this recording on late Thursday night / early Friday morning, there were only 3 matches in the books. They are, in fact, having the final match on Destruction in Sumo Hall next week. The other 3 matches that I was perplexed by, that I could not find, simply haven't happened yet and are going to continue to take place on the current tour that is happening. I don't know why I was so confused by that, but while I took my little break there, I looked that up and got that all straightened out. So with the one draw that they have already done, you would think that the 7th, there's got to be another draw in there, right? I'm not sure what the other results have been on the other 3 matches, but you would think that they're going to ensure that the final match is dramatic with a tie to ensure that we get the tie-breaking match in the 7th match on the final match of the tour in Sumo Hall. So the first match, they did in fact have the 30-minute draw on the Blue Justice show. Then in Fukuoka, Strong Style won match number 2. And then match number 3, which was not taped, did not air on New Japan World, in Nagoya, the Wato Nagata Shota Aminu team won. So right now, it is 1-1 going into match number 4. So I guess they would have to have, if there's 3 matches left, one more draw in there somewhere to have these guys, to have these 2 sides going into the final at 2 matches apiece. Or I guess what they could do is have one team be up 3 matches to 2 and have one team in a position to clinch it up and win 4-2-1 over the other, or have the other team come back and tie it at 3 and then have the series end in a tie. But I think that's less likely. So one of these next 3 matches coming up, I suspect they'll do another draw and then, have the deciding match in Sumo Hall. At any rate, let's move on to NXT. You know how much I love NXT. And I love the fact that Rich Kraetsch has to come back from wherever he is, the North Pole or whatever the fuck, and immediately review an NXT premium live event upon his return to this program. If he ever does come back, maybe Rich Kraetsch has just skipped town. Maybe he has just skipped town, never to return. Maybe he'll stay in the Netherlands or wherever he's at. I keep thinking it's the Netherlands. He's in Norway. They both start with N. I think they're in the same time zone. Two wildly different cultures, I would think. So I'm probably offending every single Norwegian and Dutch person listening to the show. If Alistair Overeem is listening right now, I apologize, sir. All right, let's talk about this NXT No Mercy. So, I am a complete psychopath. In between the last segment that I recorded and this segment of the show, I watched 5 weeks worth of NXT. 5 weeks. 5. 1 month and 1 week. To prepare for this review that I'm probably going to blow through in 12 minutes. That's the kind of dedication you get around here. Listen, I work hard. I have to say, the last 5 weeks of NXT weren't nearly as bad as NXT is typically. Now, to be fair, I did fast forward through some of the matches with who I know are horrible wrestlers. I fast forwarded through a lot of the pre-tape segments. So really, when you're only watching the best stuff, it's amazing how much better these shows come across. But at any rate, I am prepared to prepare you for a NXT PLE that I suspect the vast majority of you will never watch anyway. That's what we do around here at 4:16 a.m. Pre-show match that Rich will not watch. Blair Davenport will take on Kelani Jordan. Next up, British round rules for the Heritage Cup. You know, I wrote about Noam Dar's Heritage Cup match against Nathan Fraser in my August Notebook Roundup. I think the Heritage Cup stuff is the best stuff on NXT. I love the Heritage Cup rules. It's sort of like British rounds with a twist. It's best 2 out of 3 falls. You win 2 falls, it's over. If it goes the full 6 rounds, if there's a DQ or a knockout, it's over. There's 6 rounds. I think 6 3-minute rounds. Is that what it is? Something like that. But it'll be Noam Dar taking on Butch. Butch, of course, won the NXT Global Heritage Invitational, which was a little mini G1 style tournament to determine who the challenger would be for this Heritage Cup match. Butch was in Group A, and he defeated Tyler Bate in the deciding match. Not quite the level of match you would expect, or that we had seen from those two in the past in previous eras of NXT. Good little TV match, though. Butch went undefeated in the block, scored 5 points, 2 wins and a draw. He had a draw with Axiom. As I said, he defeated Tyler Bate in the block deciding match, and he beat Charlie Dempsey. Charlie Dempsey, with the offer, he lost to all 3 guys, finished in last place. So Butch advanced to the final where he took on Joe Coffey, who won Group B, besting Nathan Fraser and Duke Hudson, who had 4 points each. And poor Akira Tozawa, 0-3. Not only did Akira Tozawa go 0-3 in this thing, okay, but Akira Tozawa, 2 out of his 3 matches in this tournament here, I was excited about this. I'm like, I get to see some Akira Tozawa. They never booked the guy. 2 of his 3 matches aired on NXT Level Up on Peacock. That's what they think of Akira Tozawa. This was billed as an international tournament, so I feel like they had to shoehorn a Japanese guy in there. What's Akira Tozawa up to? Nothing. All right, let's bring him in, have him do job duty, and have him do those jobs on NXT Level Up. And the one match he had on TV, on NXT proper, he lost in a squash. So in case you were wondering what Akira Tozawa is up to, Dragon Gate fans, close your ears. Although they're used to it by now. That's what Akira Tozawa is up to in this company. And let me tell you something. The stuff that I saw The one match that he had, the short match on TV, and the highlights that they showed from one of the matches on Level Up, they didn't even bother showing highlights of the other. He looked really good. He's in tremendous shape. He just has a great spark in the ring. He just, they don't care about him. And I'm sure he's making, 6 figures. And he loves America. And he lives here now. So I can't begrudge the guy. You never hear a peep out of him. He don't complain. And I follow the Rich Kraetsch rules. If you don't complain and you enjoy your time in WWE, whether you're pushed or not, I can't begrudge you. It's these people who sign and then re-sign with the company, complain about their push, complain about their spot constantly. Those are the people that can fuck off. Don't re-sign. Or I don't want to hear it. Akira Tozawa seems happy. He don't care. He knows it's a work. It's disappointing as a fan. I'd like to see him do more. They didn't even put his matches on TV. And in Group A, Charlie Dempsey was on Level Up twice. In fact, by the time the block deciding match, when Butch and Tyler Bate had their block deciding match, they didn't even have the result on the table for the Axiom Charlie Dempsey match, which took place because I think Level Up airs on Tuesdays, on Peacock, the same day as NXT airs on TV. And I guess it airs afterwards when it finally streams, so they were kayfabing it, even though I'm sure it was taped. I'd probably have to double check that. I don't care enough to do it right now. My point here is, they had Butch and Tyler Bate have their block deciding match before they even made the audience aware of who won the Axiom Charlie Dempsey bout. So when they put the table up, those two guys still only had 2 matches in the books, and they were already celebrating Butch advancing, which I thought was like, we don't care about these other 2 assholes. They don't have enough points anyway. And we're not even going to bother putting their result on the screen. And I'm just thinking to myself, what kind of TNA Bound for Glory bullshit is this? I mean, geez. We couldn't have had those guys have their match before Butch and Tyler Bate had their match, or at least just throw the result up. How many people are watching Level Up anyway? Over under 10,000. I'll take the under. Over under 5,000. What's the average viewership for Level Up? Is it over or under 5,000 people a week? I say it's under 10. 5? I don't know. Still might be under. Joe Gagney. Me every now and then. And 4,998 other absolute losers. That's who's watching NXT Level Up every week. Your 2 favorite Joes. Though most of you probably have Samoa over me and Gagney. So it's going to be Butch and Joe Coffey in the final, and then Butch wins that one, and he moves on, and will take on Noam Dar. You know what was funny? Was the Global Heritage Invitational G1 knockoff here that they had wasn't contested under the Heritage Cup rules. They were just straight up 12-minute time limit matches. That's right. You heard me right. 12-minute time limit matches. No rounds. No best of 3. So you're winning this tournament wrestling traditional singles bouts with a 12-minute time limit to earn a spot in a Heritage Cup match, which has the funky rule. I don't know. What am I doing here? Carmelo Hayes will defend the NXT title against Ilya Dragunov. That could be good. Braun Breaker takes on Baron Corbin. That has actually been positioned, in my view, as the biggest match on the show. They got the closing angle on the Go Home NXT, which aired after the Carmelo Hayes Ilya Dragunov contract signing. And Breaker is still, for all intent and purpose, in my view, based on what I just saw, watching 5 hours of this shit, positioned as the top guy in the brand. Becky Lynch defends the NXT Women's title against Tiffany Stratton in an Extreme Rules match. Lynch went to NXT, won the title, popped a big rating. You all know that. The match was okay. Nice little 3-star match. And Stratton gets another shot at her title here to earn her title back in an Extreme Rules match. Dirty Dom, which is what we're supposed to call him now, defends the NXT North American title against Trick Williams. Trick Williams won a 4-way match to earn this title shot against Dom, and this was a very good 4-way match. Let me see if I can... It was Dragon Lee. I just watched it, and I can't remember who was in it. It was Dragon Lee, Tyler Bate, who just lost in the Heritage Cup tournament, and then they just put him in a 4-way number 1 contender match for a different title on the show, which is, some interesting booking. I'm not going to get worked up about it because it's NXT, and I'm not going to do that. And Axiom were the other 3 men in the match. Trick Williams, I didn't really like the finish because they did a fluky finish. They did all this hot action in the match, and, Axiom, Dragon Lee, and Tyler Bate are all excellent wrestlers, okay? But they did a gimmick finish where Trick Williams bonked heads with one of the dudes who was outside on the apron. That guy fell out of the ring. The other guy got knocked out of the ring. And then Trick Williams, who was unconscious, then fell on top of the last remaining guy that was inside the ring and scored the pin. So they got him, they got a WWE everything up in this company. But it was a really good match. Borderline Notebook. And Trick Williams, look, I've been on that guy for over a year. I still think he has more upside than Carmelo Hayes for the main roster. And they're finally giving Trick a chance to get in there and wrestle longer matches and show what he could do outside of just standing in the corner for Carmelo Hayes. Carmelo Hayes is more of a total package right now. He carries himself like a star. He's a much better talker. Although I'm not sure he's a much better talker. Trick Williams is a good talker. He doesn't get a chance to cut the kinds of promos that Carmelo Hayes gets to cut. But Trick Williams is taller. He has a better look. I think he's more moldable in my mind. I think Carmelo Hayes is what he is. He's been an indie guy for a while. We all know the deal with him. Trick Williams, I think, has the higher upside than Hayes, who's pretty much at or near his ceiling at this point. Whereas Trick Williams, he may never surpass Hayes, but I do think the ceiling is there, and there's a chance that he surpasses Hayes and becomes a bigger star. I would buy stock in Trick Williams before I would buy stock in Carmelo Hayes. It's going to be cheaper stock, and it has a chance to be worth more in the end, is what I'm getting at here. He takes on Dirty Dom for the NXT title. It's an interesting match because Dom stinks. We all know Dom stinks. Dom isn't any good. All of his matches are smoke and mirrors. He's a guy who's never going to be good. Trick Williams is green as hell. So I'm sure it's going to be a lot of smoke and mirrors. They're going to muck it up, but it has a chance to fall apart. So it's going to be an interesting match to watch from that standpoint. By the way, Dragon Lee is your special guest referee. Alrighty then. Mustafa Ali was involved in this storyline, and then he just got fired in the middle of it. Same thing happened to Dana Brooke, who was involved. It was in the middle of a storyline on NXT on these shows I just watched, and then she just disappeared. Daba Kato as well. He did a job to Tyler Bate. Well, he wasn't really in a storyline, but I got to see his final match probably ever. Can't see him landing anywhere. And then we've got The Family, which is D'Angelo and Channing Stacks, 2 dimes of Broken Necks Lorenzo, whatever his name is, defending the tag team titles against 3 teams. All these teams had to earn a spot at the table over the last few weeks, and they did these terrible vignettes, these terrible pre-tapes, with the fake Italian, the stereotypical Italian music that you would hear in the worst Italian restaurant in your town, and Tony D'Angelo doing his awful Saturday Night Live mobster impression. And the other teams are the Creed brothers, Humberto Carrillo and Angel Garza. And Out the Mud. That's right. The name of the team is Out the Mud. Lucian Price, and Bronco Nima. Two big guys. I watched them beat Hank Waller and Tank, whatever the fuck his name is. What's the Tank guy's name? Let me see if I can find that. Tank Ledger. They're doing a Hank and Tank tag team. They're like hillbillies that wear cutoffs. It's going nowhere. I feel bad for them. They probably think they're going somewhere. They're going nowhere under that gimmick. Out the Mud won the match, though, and moves on. They're managed by Scripps. Scripps. That's Reggie, or Reginald, for those of you who remember him from the main roster. The acrobatic fella, who then was a masked wrestler in NXT called Scripps. Doesn't wear the mask anymore. He's basically just Reggie, but he's still called Scripps. And he manages Out the Mud. I don't know what any of that means, but they are part of this four-way for the tag team titles. So that is your NXT No Mercy premium live event that I'm sure all of you will be forking over your $14.99 a month or whatever for the Peacock to make sure you don't miss that one. All right, sticking with WWE, we had two more cuts that we have to discuss. Ikeman Jiro Kuroshio was cut. Can you believe he was with WWE for 3 years? 3 years! It's crazy. Now, they hadn't been using him. Allegedly, he just re-signed another 3-year deal, which we all know WWE contracts are basically rolling 90-day contracts, and he was a victim of a cut. So that 3-year deal gets set on fire, and he gets paid for 3 more months. Basically, he hasn't been on TV since last year. He was a regular, semi-regular. I can't even call him a regular. Lately, he's been on Level Up after not being on TV for about 6 or 7 months. He last appeared on NXT proper last December. Disappeared for ages. I don't even think he was hurt. May have been hurt. I didn't hear he was hurt. And then popped back up on Level Up, where he's been doing jobs on Level Up basically all summer. And he's worked a couple of the Largo Loop shows as well. But as far as appearing on tape, he has been on the losing end of a tag team match to Hank and Tank on Level Up, teaming with Quincy Elliott, who was also released. Then a week later, he lost to Damon Kemp on Level Up. These are all Level Up. He lost to Oro Mensa on Level Up in August. And then on September 5th, he lost to Tavion Heights. And then on September 12th, he had his final WWE match, losing to Luca Crucifino. So Jiro doing jobs for all the stars over on Level Up, and they let him go. Now, he will unfortunately best be known for 2 things on this run. Number 1, his tag team with Kushida called Jacket Time. Why? Well, because he wears a jacket. And because Kushida does the Marty McFly gimmick and wears the vest. So they dubbed these 2 Japanese men Jacket Time because they both wear jackets. Very creative. The creative minds in NXT are unmatched. And of course, his other gimmick, his other televised gimmick from a couple of years ago, where he was basically he was doing mukbang, which, for those of you familiar with mukbang or mukbang, however you say it, this is where people on YouTube gorge on enormous amounts of food. This is very popular and usually emanates from Korea. South Korea, of course. You're probably saying to yourself, but Joe, Jiro is Japanese. Why would they give this man a Korean gimmick? And my answer would be, what company are we talking about here? They're all Asian. Who knows the difference? It's very likely what someone had to say when they gave Jiro the mukbang gimmick. He was also shown on TV with explosive diarrhea in a bathroom stall. So that's how his run went. Now, I'm not a big fan of Jiro. I kind of liked when he signed because that meant he would no longer be popping up on Puro shows that I wanted to watch because I don't like watching this guy. Wrestle One doesn't exist anymore, so I don't know. He was working some All Japan before he went to WWE and bouncing around, what remained of some of these other Japanese groups. He doesn't really have a home to go back to, so I don't know what happens with him. But he'll get work in Japan, and he'll be fine from that standpoint. As far as Matt Riddle goes, I wouldn't touch that guy with the proverbial 10-foot pole. I wouldn't touch Matt Riddle with a 1,000-foot pole. Matt Riddle he's not going to get booked in a lot of the indies that he was getting booked on before he signed because of all of the speaking out stuff that's surrounding him and all the other weirdness. And a lot of those kinds of trendy indies are going to stay away from him because those fans are just not going to have that. So, I would expect lower level indies, the kinds of indies that, the non-trendy indies, if he's going to get indie work. AEW is not going to touch him. I would be stunned if AEW goes anywhere near Matt Riddle. He is a ticking time bomb. All of the, and it's not just Candy Cartwright when it comes to the allegations. He has other allegations too that kind of flew under the radar. So, and then there's a lot of other weirdness surrounding him. Whatever happened at the airport a couple weeks ago, a lot of the dark Twitter rumors, most of which I'm not even privy to, but I could put two and two together. There's always been, stuff's out there if you want to look into it. And he's just a guy who, he's someone that I wouldn't go anywhere near. He's just a ticking time bomb. He's a PR disaster waiting to happen or potentially worse. So, I would be stunned if AEW goes anywhere near Matt Riddle, despite the fact that he's enormously talented. Now, New Japan was interested in Matt Riddle right before he signed with WWE. In fact, he was booked for a tour. I think he was going to team with Jeff Cobb in a World Tag League. I think he was booked, as I recall it. So, look, New Japan, particularly when they're booking guys in Japan, they've looked the other way. They booked Mike Elgin long after everybody stopped booking him here. Rocky has attempted to book and has booked people for New Japan Strong. He tried to sneak Marty Scurll in under the cloak of darkness. So can I write off New Japan? I absolutely cannot write off New Japan. It would not stun me at all if Matt Riddle ends up in New Japan. And, I'm sure if he can keep his nose clean, literally and figuratively, and, and stay out of trouble, I'm sure he'll have great matches in New Japan if that's the case. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. Some people have opined that Noah would be a great destination or a good fit for Matt Riddle. I have to agree. Again, it's Japan, and they're not so concerned with American controversies. In some cases, may not even be aware of them. And, he's got, Kurt Stallion is already there. Those guys have, been aligned professionally in the past. I think they've already been tweeting at each other. And he fits the style of the promotion too. He's not going to make WWE money in Noah, but Noah, by Japanese standards, is going to pay pretty well. They're not going to pay what New Japan's going to pay, but it's steady work. I could absolutely see Noah reaching out to Matt Riddle and, trying to bring him in, especially if Stallion puts in the word. So I would bet on Noah or New Japan and lower level and non-trendy indies. Because if you're one of these trendy indies, you can't book the guy. You can't do it. The trendier indies have kind of, they get checked by the wokier fans, and you can't get away with it. So Now, Japan, they tend to look the other way with American controversies. Look at Trevor Bauer. If you don't know who Trevor Bauer is, go ahead and Google, but be warned. The things he has been accused of are absolutely fucking heinous. Former Major League Baseball pitcher, a Cy Young winner a couple of years ago in 2020, one of the best pitchers in the game, was signed a huge free agent deal with the Dodgers. Then the accusations started coming out. And it wasn't just one victim. Then multiple victims started coming out, all with similar stories of absolutely heinous stuff. Never arrested, never charged, never convicted. But due to the severity of the allegations and due to having a past where he wasn't necessarily criminal, but he was considered kind of an asshole. Again, Google is your friend here. I don't have time to get into the back history of Trevor Bauer, but he was always kind of a sleazy guy, kind of a shitty guy, but nothing beyond the pale until these allegations came out, sexual in nature. And he had his contract terminated after, a year and a half of, you deal with the union and you deal with it. But anyway, he had his contract terminated and he's been effectively blackballed from Major League Baseball. No one's going to touch Trevor Bauer. And if you look up, what the allegations are, you'll quickly see why. This is not your standard. I hate to frame it this way, but this isn't like your standard issue crime or even domestic violence or something that he's accused. It's just stuff that's truly heinous. So he's effectively been blackballed from Major League Baseball, but now he's playing baseball in Japan. He's a massive star there. He was an all-star, and I think he won their MVP. So, they'll take on our problems in Japan. So the point here is I can most definitely see Matt Riddle ending up with steady work in either New Japan or Noah. I don't know necessarily if he would go to any other group there because I'm not sure that the juice would be worth the squeeze monetarily for him to work anywhere else other than New Japan or Noah. So, speaking of Noah, Katsuhiko Nakajima is leaving Noah. And there was an article that just came out, Yahoo Japan, I believe, where he said he's been thinking about leaving for a couple of years now and finally made the decision to do so. Now, I don't know what his next move is. I haven't heard anything about his next move. I would think that if he made the decision to leave, he has something lined up. Or maybe he doesn't. Shockingly, I know we joke about this, but he's still shockingly young because he started at 14. He's 35 years old. Right smack dab in his pro wrestling prime. And he's been with Pro Wrestling Noah now, either full-time or part-time, since 2008. It's a long time. Look, he wasn't super popular there. He's a guy who rubs people the wrong way. He's a little intense. He's a bit of a prick. He had multiple incidents where he accidentally knocked out other wrestlers. There was one at a presser. There was one in a match. And he's a guy that a lot of older veteran shooters would refuse to do jobs for. Hideki Suzuki is one example. And, not the most popular guy. Definitely, has a bit of an attitude and a reputation for being a little unlikable. And things obviously weren't pleasant for him in Noah, particularly during the Muto era. And, that's been documented by me behind our paywall and in other places. Now he's getting out. He's 35. I guess he says, all right, well, look, if I'm going to make a go at this in New Japan or maybe America, this is my chance. I don't think that WWE is a good fit for him. And I don't think he would do well there. I think that, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I'd say I'd love to see him in AEW, but I don't really have confidence that AEW would use him or utilize him, properly. I just don't. Whereas a few years ago when I had more faith in AEW before, it's I don't want to do a whole Tony thing, but I don't know. I just don't feel like, ideally I'd like to see him end up in New Japan. I think that's a perfect fit, and I don't know the political. I'd have to think a little deeper. Who are his enemies there? Who are his allies? It's Kensuke Sasaki. Who is he? Does he have allies in the office there to put in a word? I don't know. They've obviously used Nakajima before. Sporadically. I mean, you go back to, what year was that G1? 2016? I think it was 2016. And obviously he has worked some of the joint shows over the last couple of years. And you go back further than that, some of the other joint shows and All Together Nows and things like that in the previous decade, and so they're not opposed to using them in spots. Would they hire him? I don't know. I don't know where else he thinks he's going to go. Is he going to go to All Japan? That's possible too. All Japan, don't look now. They're not very far behind Noah in terms of attendance and things like that. Noah is owned by the more stable company, and but ever since the Muto retirement stuff ended, their attendance has not been great, and All Japan's nipping at their heels in terms of attendance. So maybe he can get comparable money in All Japan, and continue working that Kento Miyahara program. He already beat the guy once in a highly anticipated match. And, maybe the seeds were planted then. Maybe he was recruited. And now he jumps to All Japan and finishes the program at Miyahara. And Miyahara gets his win back on his home turf. So my gut's telling me he's going to All Japan. I'd like to see him in New Japan, but my gut is telling me he's going to All Japan. But I know nothing. And I guess we'll see. I'm sure Rich and I will talk about this moving forward. Last topic, Bart Sawyer passed away on September 12th at the age of 57. What is crazy about this is 4 days earlier, Brett Sawyer passed away. And these men were not related. There is no relation between Bart Sawyer and Brett Sawyer. Brett Sawyer, of course, is the brother of Buzz Sawyer, but no relation to Bart. The Brett Sawyer's last name was Woyan. Bart Sawyer, his name was Stephen Stewart. But there are similarities that go beyond having the same kayfabed last name. And they're a bit eerie. And it's a bit eerie that they died within days of each other. These are two guys who were both undersized workers who were excellent wrestlers, but undersized, which hurt both of their careers, right? They both probably had their best runs in Portland, about a decade apart. Brett Sawyer in the early 80s, Bart Sawyer in the early 90s. They both became television job guys for WCW later in their careers. About a decade apart. Brett Sawyer in the early 90s, Bart Sawyer in the late 90s. They both bounced around what remained of the territories at the end of their careers, unable to match the success that they had very early in their careers in Portland. And then they both die within 4 days of each other. And I think, unfortunately, because of that, Bart Sawyer and Brett Sawyer are going to be confused by a lot of people moving forward. When you have two guys with similar names, with similar career paths, albeit about a decade apart, that's kind of inevitable. People are going to confuse these two guys. So, anyway, Bart Sawyer passes away. He was trained by Bob Geigel in the what remained of the Kansas City territory there at the time, which by then, I think in the late 80s, had already been renamed the World Wrestling Alliance, which was Bob Geigel's attempt to go national, much like Bill Watts when he, renamed Mid-South the UWF, and the Fullers when they rebranded the old Continental / Southeastern territory as Continental. They rebranded Southeastern as Continental to make it sound more national. It was the same deal with Geigel, who renamed his territory World Wrestling Alliance in a very feeble attempt to compete with the WWF. And that territory, which was a very lousy territory, especially by that time, especially by the working standards. I mean, it was just a terrible territory from that standpoint. Really stood no chance whatsoever, and they tried to go into business with Vern Gagne. They tried to go into business with Fritz von Erich and form this alliance. Promoter, two other promoters who were dying at the time. And you know what happens when these promoters try to work together, it never works out. And then that territory, the Geigel territory, the Kansas City territory eventually, died in the late 80s or whatever. But that's where Bart Sawyer got his start. And from there, he went to Portland. And that's where he was doing the Bart Simpson gimmick. His first name, they shared, the Bart. And it's hard to explain what a phenomenon Bart Simpson was at that time, 1990, 1991, 1992. He came to the ring to the Bartman theme, a song, which was a novelty hit on the radio. And, he got the Bart Simpson haircut, and he acted like a hyper overactive, and he was an undersized guy to begin with. So he was basically doing a Bart Simpson type gimmick, and it got over in Portland. And he had a nice little run there for, he was in and out, but for a number of years. And that was probably the best singles run of his career. And Portland obviously died as well a couple years after the Kansas City territory died. So the place where he got his start and the place where he was actually getting over and achieving some success, they both were no longer options. He eventually ends up in Memphis in 1996. And this is where he was the first tag team partner of Dwayne Johnson, who was sent to Memphis by the WWF to, get some seasoning. And they paired Dwayne Johnson up with Bart Sawyer in a tag team. And it was Flex Cavana, which was Dwayne Johnson's gimmick and name in Memphis. Teaming with Bart Sawyer, they won the USWA tag team titles twice. They won it in a tournament final in the Mid-South Coliseum. They won a tournament to win the vacant titles. They then traded the titles with Bill Dundee and Jerry Lawler. So they had Dwayne Johnson working with Dundee and Lawler. And Johnson was only there for the summer. He was only in Memphis for a couple of months in the summer before WWF brought him back to debut him at the Survivor Series that year as Rocky Maivia. And he teamed with Bart Sawyer and feuded with Jerry Lawler all the way. And he lost a loser leaves town match to Jerry Lawler at the end of his Memphis run. Along with Bart Sawyer, he won the tag team titles twice. They won them in the tournament final. They dropped them to Dundee and Lawler a couple of weeks later, won them right back from Dundee and Lawler a week after that, held them another week and lost them for good to Brickhouse Brown and Reggie B. Fine, which was the team that they beat in the tournament final, a month earlier to win the titles to begin with. So Bart Sawyer and Flex Cavana had 2 USWA tag team title reigns that totaled, I think, exactly 3 weeks, which sounds like nothing, but in Memphis. And I wrote about this in the match of the week because my match of the week was a Bart Sawyer, Flex Cavana tag match from Memphis Television against the Punisher and Tony Falk. The Punisher went on to become Bull Buchanan in WWF. Tony Falk is a longtime Memphis wrestler. But that was our match of the week last week behind the paywall. And it was in the midst of, I believe, the first 2-week tag team title run of Flex Kavana and Bart Sawyer. So Bart Sawyer was the perfect guy to put Dwayne Johnson with as being someone who was super green, because Bart Sawyer, again, was known as a steady, dependable, reliable, solid worker. So, doing the Memphis loop, teaming with him, and then working matches against Dundee and Lawler. I mean, that's as good of a crash course education you're going to get as a green pro wrestler who they're trying to rush to the WWF and put on television right away, because everybody knew Dwayne Johnson was as blue chip as it gets. I mean, Dwayne Johnson was universally regarded as one of the best prospects and easiest to project superstars in the history of wrestling. Every single pundit, every single person inside the business knew that Dwayne Johnson was going to be a huge star unless he got hit by a bus. Everybody knew. There's not one person who was like, this Dwayne Johnson, I'm not sure. No, everybody knew. So he did a couple of months in Memphis, and if you go back and watch that stuff, the promos are awful. The work, I mean, The Rock was never a great worker. He was competent, at times good. He knew what he could do. He knew what he couldn't do. He wasn't a bad worker either. But, the Memphis stuff is funny, though. But, Bart Sawyer, ultimately his claim to fame is going to be as the original tag team partner of Dwayne Johnson in Memphis. And, from there, as I said, he became a television jobber in WCW. They were never going to push him. And then he... by now it's the late 90s, and there's no Portland to fall back on. And, if this sounds familiar to the Brett Sawyer obit that I did last week, it's because it is. It's eerie. It's like the same guy 10 years later in a lot of ways. And from there, he just bounced around a lot of the Tennessee, what remained of the territories in Tennessee, whatever, whether it was the USWA or whatever, Memphis incarnation was out there at the time. He worked for Burt Prentice's USA Wrestling out in Nashville, Tennessee, on the other side of the state, which was the Burt Prentice promotion that I think I don't think it's still active, but he ran that for like 20 years. So he was always in and around Memphis and Nashville and Tennessee and some of, because those southern territories kind of outlasted all of the other territories around the country. For whatever reason, Memphis had multiple different incarnations. Corey Macklin ran a version of Memphis, and Memphis itself. If you look that stuff up, whether Lawler was involved or not, there was always something going on in Memphis in terms of wrestling. What was I guess Corey Macklin's version of Memphis wrestling. Let me look this up here. Yeah, it was called Memphis Wrestling. I guess it wasn't. I thought maybe it was something more creative, but but Bart Sawyer ended up there too. If there was a promotion running in Memphis or Nashville, he was probably a part of it in the late 90s, early 2000s, working as Smart Bart Sawyer. Was one of his last gimmicks in wrestling. Smart Bart Sawyer. He had a cup of coffee in TNA, which of course at that time in 2004 was running in Tennessee and Nashville. So he was a TV job guy in the early days of TNA as well. And, worked NWA Wild Side, which was Georgia. He was in and out of there as well. And then he had a stroke at a young age in 2004, and that was it for him. He never wrestled again. So he had the stroke, he retired, and then that was it for him in pro wrestling. It's crazy because last week I talked about how Brett Sawyer had this weird, I don't even know if any of it's on tape, wing tour in Japan at one point. And Bart Sawyer also did some wing tours, just like Brett Sawyer. It is spooky and scary how similar these two men are. It's just, it's crazy how their careers were like the same exact curve, almost exactly 10 years apart, and then they pass away 4 days apart. I mean, you got to be kidding me. So he had that stroke in 2004. It put him in a coma. And he did recover, but that was it. And then, passed away at the age of 57 a couple of weeks ago. So Bart Sawyer, born November 30th, 1965, died on September 12th. I think I'm done. I don't have nothing else for you. I want to thank the producer, Andrew Rich, once again for helping us put this episode together this week. Don't forget Instant Reaction Live, WrestleDream, on Sunday, this Sunday, from Seattle. Rich Craich will return. That is the Rich Craich Return to Audio. The WrestleDream Instant Reaction Live, $10 tier. And then next week, Rich Craich will finally be back after a 2-week hiatus from the Flagship. Take care.
Do you like wrestling trivia? Then check out the 5-Star Match Game, the Pro Wrestling Quiz Show. I'm Joe Gagney. In every episode, I grill 3 contestants with 5 rounds of power-packed wrestling trivia. We have over 30 evergreen episodes in the archives covering WWE, AEW, Japan, Mexico, and much, 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 much more. Play along at home and check it out today.
Hello, Voices of Wrestling listener. Dave Ryan here. Have you ever wondered to yourself how many hidden gems are hidden away inside the last years of World Championship Wrestling? Have you ever asked yourself how many tenuous gags can be made about the name Mike Enos? And have you ever thought about what it sounds like for 2 Irishmen to interpret a very chaotic company through its B-show? The answers to all this and more are just a click away. Check out Days of Thunder every second Thursday on the Voices of Wrestling podcast network.